Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lukas Wacker, and with me, as always, we have Kyle Cushman. And oh boy, what a weekend in motorsports.
Whew.
We got some crazy drama, things that we never would have thought possible going into this weekend actually came to fruition. And we'll talk about that definitely at length because it is deserving in the NASCAR Cup Series, even in the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series as well. We also have Formula One returning to Imola for the first time since 2006 to recap as well. So lots of different things to discuss today, and we've got some news, obviously, to discuss as well that we've talked that has broken since we last recorded last week on Thursday. So lots of things to discuss. But first off, Kyle, how are you holding up after a crazy night last night in the NASCAR Cup Series and a weekend as a whole?
Oh, it was wild. It was amazing. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of goofed up on the time of the F1 race. It was earlier than it usually is. It was a 7:10 start, I believe it was, here on the East Coast. So I woke up at the regular time that an F1 race is here, which is usually 8 pre-race and then 9 race. And woke up to watch the podium ceremony. So that was a nice little spoiler, which was unfortunate. But other than that, the rest of the weekend was fantastic because Martinsville, as the cutoff race, was a smashing success. And we got a lot to break down from all 3 series, really, in this one.
Yeah, that Martinsville definitely delivered. Props to NASCAR first off for that schedule change to put that as the cutoff race instead of the round of 8 opener. It was a great closer. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the closer himself later on as well. So
okay.
I didn't have that plan, but it just came to me right there, and I feel pretty damn good about that one. So we're in a good mood to start the show, and we'll start off today with the news and notes section of the show before we get into the Cup Series, and we'll start off with the NASCAR Xfinity Series schedule being released for 2021. They didn't release the Truck Series yet, but the Xfinity Series has been released, and there's been a couple of changes. Obviously, some were expected, and definitely a lot less, standalone races compared to what we've seen in the Xfinity Series in previous seasons, where they go to different road courses or different, even short tracks that are off the Cup Series calendar. But this time they're going very, very much similar to the Cup Series with basically identical schedules apart from one race for next season. So we'll break it down for you here, Kyle, for everybody listening. It basically begins in Daytona as per usual. It's obviously the opening of the season. Then they go to the Homestead Miami Speedway, a typical change there as the Cup Series already released their schedule. They're staying in Florida for the opening 2 weekends of the season before they go out west for the West Coast swing. And then we have Atlanta as its usual kind of spring date there, as it has been the past couple of seasons. Excuse me. And then we have Martinsville, the first big change here, Kyle, as it appears on the earliest part of the season for the Xfinity Series calendar. As coming into this season, we never had Martinsville on the Xfinity Series calendar, but we have 2 of them this time around in 2021.
Yeah, this is an interesting announcement and one that I'm a little bit disappointed in. I'm going to be honest. When you look at the lower series of NASCAR, some of the brightest events that they have are those standalone races. You look back in the past, and obviously a little bit biased here, but you look at those Montreal races, but more recently you even look at stuff like Iowa and some of the other ones like Mid-Ohio and whatnot as kind of the marquee events of the Xfinity schedule. And this year we have one of those, and that's the one standalone race at Mid-Ohio on June 5th. And that's the only event apart from the Cup Series. And I understand why. For the most part, it's a lot of cost-saving measures. A lot of the big teams in the Xfinity Series have companion teams in the Cup Series for obvious reasons. And because of that, a lot of the pit crews kind of share time. So saves money for everybody at a time where NASCAR is looking to save money, especially with COVID going to affect things into next year as well. Kind of makes sense from that perspective. But I got to say, seeing 32 of 33 Xfinity weekends being the same as the Cup schedule is pretty disappointing. That being said, the Cup schedule is fantastic for the most part, which means that the Xfinity schedule for the most part is fantastic. it just kind of leaves me wanting a little bit more and seeing maybe some of those different mixes of a couple different ovals that we're maybe not going to in the Cup Series, maybe a different road course, even though we do have that Mid-Ohio standalone and stuff like that. There's just a couple extra things that you would hope for. And hopefully when we see the Truck Series schedule release, we do see a couple of those differences. You look at what Gateway and CTMP in the past have done in the Truck Series, for example. So you hope to see a couple more standalone races. So I'm a little disappointed in that regard, but you can't really complain too much because it is a pretty strong schedule. It's got the same changes for the most part as the Cup Series, and then the playoffs essentially are unchanged from what we actually got this year. So overall, it's solid, but would have really wanted some more standalones.
Yeah, the cost-saving measures have really taken into play here for next season. It's just trying to keep and minimize the travel, and because a lot of the teams that are in the Xfinity Series, like pit crews and whatnot, carry over to the Cup Series side of things. So it's a lot easier and budget-wise as well for teams to cost save on travel. And there's definitely a lot of variables that went into this decision-making, and there's definitely some highlights and definitely some lowlights. And right off the bat for myself is there's only one Bristol race on the Xfinity Series calendar.
Yeah.
Entirely. They won't be racing on the dirt at Bristol. And I don't know if they will do it for the Truck Series or not, because they've done Eldora, so I don't think it's an impossible task for them to do it. I would imagine the trucks would be a nice little addition to that Bristol dirt weekend, but to not have the Xfinity Series there is a bit interesting when they're making this as their big money maker for next season, and they really want to drive that home. And the Xfinity Series is always with the Cup Series at Bristol when they run. So I think that's a pretty big disappointment for myself, just seeing it not even in the playoffs as well as Bristol. It's the regular season finale. I think it would be a great playoff race, as maybe the Cup Series proved or disproved in some cases this past season. But I think just being in that cutoff race, the regular season finale for Bristol is kind of getting forgotten. And it's, in my opinion, the best track on the NASCAR calendar across all three series. So it's disappointing in that regard. And then also, Kyle, we lost Iowa entirely from the calendar for next season. The huge difference maker, I think, that really separates the Xfinity Series to the Cup Series. And, you know, for myself, and I'm sure you as well, the Iowa we've wanted to see on the Cup Series calendar for a long time because of how successful it has been, not only in the Xfinity Series, but also for IndyCar as well when they run there. And it's disappointing to see a small state or small population state in Iowa losing racing entirely. No IndyCar, no NASCAR, no nothing at the Iowa Speedway for next season. And it all but ends their streak and ends their ties with NASCAR. And in all likelihood, this is the end of Iowa Speedway across the board in motorsports, along with Chicagoland as well. With them not returning to the Cup Series calendar, they're not running there for Xfinity Series as well. So we're losing two, I would say, very good racetracks across the board in NASCAR, and it's going to be very, very sad for them to not be on the calendar next season, Kyle.
Yeah, that's another big thing for me. When you look at what you can do in the Xfinity Series in a regular year, I'll say, because I understand why they're doing it this year, and I can't really hate on it too much when it's financial, the reasons why they're doing it. But you should be going to places like Chicagoland and Iowa, and even I'll toss Kentucky in there in the Xfinity Series when you're not going to it in the Cup Series, because it differentiates the schedules, gives you a different look. It allows you to go to markets that maybe you're leaving in the Cup Series and just kind of see what can happen. We saw a while back now, but you look at what happened with Nashville Super Speedway. They ran the lower series, went away for a few years, but now they're coming back in the Cup Series and at least the Xfinity Series as well, because that's also on the schedule there. So just would have liked to see more differentiation between the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series. I understand why they're not doing it, but if it means the death of tracks like Iowa or Chicagoland, less so Kentucky, but if it means the death of those first couple of tracks, that's really unfortunate. So hopefully we get to see Iowa back on some schedules by 2022, because the track itself said that they don't expect to be on the Truck Series schedule. So that's out the window as well. Hopefully they can survive the year and we can see them return in 2022, but my hopes aren't that high, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean the Cup Series has kind of been a carbon copy of the Xfinity Series a little bit now. I think they took more from the Xfinity Series side of thing,
Yeah.
than the Cup Series did the other way around. So, I mean, Coda's a great addition. I think that's going to be awesome. We obviously talked about that a couple of weekends ago when they announced that the Truck Series would also be there as well for their inaugural weekend for NASCAR. Mid Ohio, as Kyle said, is the only difference between the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series calendar. And then Road America is going to be on the Cup Series calendar, so nothing really changes there. On the Xfinity side of things, they add a second Atlanta date, as did the Cup Series. Watkins Glen is going to be back on the calendar next season, which we're all going to be super pumped to see. And then they go to the Indianapolis Road Course. Obviously, the Xfinity Series did that this season, and the Cup Series didn't. The Cup Series kind of takes that from the Xfinity Series. So that's kind of we talked about that at length when we did our Cup Series schedule kind of recap of what we all thought about it. I'm on the side of things where I think that I would prefer them to race on the oval for the Cup Series specifically, and then the Xfinity Series on the road course, because I thought that was great entertainment for that series. But the Cup Series on the yard of bricks and everything, I think there just should be a little bit more to that, a little bit more incentive for the guys to take that as a crown jewel race when it basically isn't really that anymore. And then, having another Darlington race also for next season for the Xfinity Series as well, copying the Cup Series schedule. And then the playoffs is basically unchanged from what the post-pandemic schedule kind of looked like. So not too many changes. I think it was 6, Kyle, if I'm not mistaken, between comers and goers for next season in terms of filling spots here or there. But anything that you like, your biggest or the thing you're looking forward to most for next season, and then maybe your biggest disappointment. I know across the board it's just having little differentiation between the two series, but overall, if you had to pick a race or two or a track or two that you like or dislike the most, what are you thinking here?
Yeah, so the final tally is added dates for Atlanta, Martinsville, Darlington, and technically Talladega as well. Because if you look at what the original schedule for the 2020 season was, there was no Talladega playoff race that gets added in based off of what we saw this year. So that's kind of a technicality there, but overall it is 6 dates changed. And then losing dates, you have Dover, Kentucky, Chicagoland, Bristol, and 2 Iowa dates, which is really, really rough. I'll say the one I'm most disappointed with is probably, I want to say Bristol, but losing both Iowa dates and completely being off the schedule is a really, really tough blow. Bristol will survive without one less Xfinity race, even if we don't want to see it go off the schedule. Losing 2 Iowa dates might be the death of that track, which is really unfortunate to say. It's been a fun track at the Xfinity level. I hope we get to see it return at some point. So that's my most disappointing one. On the positive side, I'll go ahead and I'll say I like adding that second Martinsville date. It's an early season thing. It adds another short track, so we're losing 1 there in Bristol, and we're losing 2 technically in Iowa as well, because it's one of those 3/4. Or like it's a weird length. It's in that like half mile to mile range. It's like right around that, I believe. And so adding Martinsville is going to be fun. You look at next year as well. It looks like Dale Jr. is going to be racing in that spring Martinsville race, which is going to be fun to see as well. So I really like that addition there. So those will be my 2 picks. What about yourself?
Well, thanks for stealing mine. Appreciate that. But I'll go a little different, I guess. I like the Martinsville, obviously, from going from no races to kind of begin the season to 2 all of a sudden is kind of crazy to think. But I like adding that second Talladega race in the playoffs. I've been thinking it for years, like, why are they having an off weekend in the playoffs when the Cup Series and the Truck Series go to Talladega and the Xfinity Series gets that weekend off? It's one of their biggest money makers of the year with the Super Speedway packages, and they delivered exceptionally well this past season when they tried it out in the playoffs. So I think that adding that to that playoffs, especially that first round with the Roval and Las Vegas, is always entertaining the Xfinity Series as well. I think it's a great mix there. Obviously, I would love to see Bristol in the playoffs, but I guess we don't get everything we want. I've learned we've learned that quite extensively over our years as NASCAR fans. But and then on the negative side of things, I would say either the Bristol losing a date and then the Iowa as well losing both dates. I think that's just a double blow to that entire kind of community that they built out there, the fans that go to that racetrack, albeit it's not the greatest turnout on some occasions, but the product is what really entices the viewers on TV. And it's in kind of an obscure location in Iowa. Like there's not too much out there. So I can understand why the fans, or there's not too many fans in the stands per se, but I always loved it when it was on TV. And, you know, when you look at it now, we talked about on the show, I think a couple of weeks ago, where we looked at the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series, and when the Cup regulars used to run down to the Xfinity Series and there wasn't a limit and they raced in full time, well, they always had to balance that travel with these kind of non-standalone week, or the standalone weekends itself, and it would be madness for the guys to go to the Cup Series practice on the Saturday, fly and start at the rear of the field on the Xfinity Series side of things. If they had this schedule, I'm sure a lot more people would be running the full-time Xfinity Series calendar. But with the limits and everything that they have, it kind of diminishes that possibility entirely. But it would be very, very interesting to see if NASCAR opened that back up again, who would be interested in doing something like that with a schedule that is so close in terms of the comparison of weekends. So I think that's something that is kind of a missed opportunity in looking back at it, I guess, just kind of being nostalgic in some ways, looking back at the early 2010s and even the late 2000s. But yeah, I mean, the Xfinity Series calendar, it's promising. There's definitely some disappointments, some positives as well. But any final thoughts there on the Xfinity calendar, Kyle, before we move on?
Yeah, just finally here, one last thing on the standalones and that kind of topic here. You look back to the even the late 2000s there, and specifically I'm looking at 2008 here in that schedule, and just seeing the number of standalone events is kind of remarkable. And just running down the schedule here, 2 Nashville Superspeedway dates, which at the time was different from the Cup Series. Right. You had the Autodromo down in Mexico City, which was phenomenal races. The Milwaukee Mile, Gateway, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, of course.
Oh, man.
And Memphis as well, which is a solid, 4 or 5 different races, 4 different tracks, 5 different races. 6 different races.
There should be more
they went
than
to
that.
Milwaukee twice.
They also didn't have Kentucky on the calendar then either in the Cup Series.
Right.
And then also I think they would have Indianapolis Motorsports Park as one, because unless it was off that season, but I loved Indianapolis Motorsport Park. I think that's such a great racetrack.
Yeah, Lucas Oil Raceway, yeah.
Lucas Oil Raceway, yeah. What it used to be called, kind of thing. Yeah, I call it that, but Lucas Oil Raceway. But yeah, there was some great Xfinity Series races 8 there.
Total races then? Because I think that's 2 Kentucky dates, or is it 1 or 2?
I think there's 2 Kentucky dates, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong
you're looking at and it's a 35 race season, so you're looking at
double digits,
close to at right around 10, maybe a couple less, maybe one more, but and when it's a 35 race season, that means you're looking at 25 companion races, and let's just say it is 10 standalones versus this year.
That's great.
It's 1 standalone and 32 companion, which is rough. So we'll see what happens there going forwards into the future. I hope we can get back to this kind of schedule where we go to a lot of different places. We try stuff. We'll see what happens there. But because people look back fondly on those years of the Xfinity Series and whatnot. And it's not just because of the Cup regulars that were down there at the time. It's because of the schedule. And you think back to those days of
the cars.
Of the Xfinity, of course, the cars as well. But you think back to those days, and the races that you think of are those standalone races. You don't necessarily think of. Obviously, there are exceptions and whatnot. But when I think back to those days, I think of Juan Pablo Montoya wrecking Scott Pruitt in Mexico City. I think of Ron Fellows winning at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve and all the races there.
I've watched that highlight the other day, actually.
There's so many great moments there and just going to different races. So hopefully we see that happen again going forwards. I'm hoping that this is a 1-year thing.
Yeah, I can attest to that greatly. I miss those days of Cup regulars.
God damn it, just give me Montreal again.
I know. We'll be satisfied if you just put Montreal back on the calendar.
Just wait if they take CTMP off the truck schedule next year.
Then they just don't want to even talk about a Canadian market, which there are a couple of us up here. Just don't forget about us. But
I think it might just be a COVID thing if that does happen. But
yeah, but then, COVID, then one thing leads to another and they're never back here again. So,
but I was going to say, that being said, IndyCar is supposed to be coming to Toronto. So who the hell knows?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of different reminiscing kind of thing to kind of end the Xfinity series schedule for next season. Makes us think of I would say the glory days of that series, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say so.
And it just was so good, so entertaining. But nonetheless, we won't be able to see that for a long period of time unless NASCAR wants to, lighten up a little bit on their regulations in some respects. But until that happens, which I don't anticipate to happen anytime soon, we're stuck with what we've got. And hopefully the prospects down in the Xfinity Series can make the non-standalone races that we have that much more entertaining, because it's going to be in desperate need of that in some cases. So I think it's a positive that they're, kind of copying the Cup Series schedule in some respects, that they want to limit the cost, and that's something that they're really pushing towards for the next-gen car in the Cup Series especially. So in that regard, it makes sense, but at the same time, as a fan, it's kind of disappointing to see some tracks that you really love and the difference between the two series getting as small as it basically could get right now. So hopefully they start to expand that out once again in the near future, but for now, we're stuck with what we've got. So I think with that, that's good in the Xfinity Series side of things. Yes. For the schedule, we'll talk about the Truck Series whenever they decide to release that. I anticipate that will be relatively soon. But until then, we'll move on here on the NASCAR Cup Series side of things as well. Before last episode, the new 23XI racing team by Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan, obviously, driven by Bubba Wallace for next season. They teased that they were going to release the car, and they did on this past weekend on Good Morning. It wasn't Good Morning America, but
it was a CBS thing. So
CBS
whatever.
thing. So
we're Canadian.
Whatever that is, we didn't get to watch it. So they revealed the font of the number 23, the highly anticipated number 23 car for Bubba Wallace next season. And no surprise, the shock of all shocks, they have the manufacturer of Toyota. Obviously, with Hamlin's relationship with JGR, it makes sense. And then probably the biggest tidbit of information to come out for that throughout that entire announcement period there was Mike Wheeler stepping up to be the crew chief of Bubba Wallace for next season. Obviously, Wheeler and Hamlin were together for a long period of time there at JGR before they ended ties, and now he's with Chris Gabehart. And then Wheeler's kind of been on the back seat in some respects at JGR, but now he's back atop the pit box for Bubba Wallace, and this is a huge opportunity for him, taking on a new team, a new venture, and I think it's a fantastic move by 23XI Racing Team to re-up Wheeler and put Bubba Wallace and him together for next season, Kyle.
Yeah, that's a big takeaway. The car looks solid. It tossed like a Jordan logo on like the hood, and maybe Toyota on like the quarter panel, and you can see where like that kind of like scheme is kind of coming from. We'll see what the sponsors are and everything like that going forwards. But yeah, the big thing is the crew chief announcement, and bringing Mike Wheeler over to that team is quite simply huge, in my opinion. Just look at what he was able to do the last time he was atop the pit box a couple seasons ago now with Matt DiBenedetto in the 95. And just look at the amount of times that they outperformed what you would expect their equipment level to be at, almost winning Bristol, having top 5 runs at road courses, having top 10 runs fairly consistently based on what that team had been in the past. So I really, really like that hire. I think that he was probably the best possible scenario for them.
For sure.
You look at all the different options, and yeah, sure, you could maybe go like outside Toyota or something, and like there's always like the Colburn pipe dream and all that kind of stuff. But when you look at realistic options and you look at people that weren't already tied down to a certain driver or car or whatever, Mike Wheeler is probably my top choice for crew chief, especially given the number 23 there. So I really, really like that hire, and I'm very excited to see what they can do next year. Obviously, I would have preferred probably to bring over Jerry Baxter and keep that relationship going, just given how good it was this year. But I think Mike Wheeler is a very solid second choice.
I think Wheeler makes a ton of sense in terms of he was over at the 95 with the Benedetto, a very similar kind of alliance with JGR.
Yeah.
It's going to be a similar transition, and he can kind of he has a base of what he can expect from JGR and how much of an alliance that's going to be had there with the new team. So it just makes sense on both sides of things, and I'm sure Hamlin's kind of relationship with him didn't do him any harm either. So I think it's a great partnership with Bubba Wallace, and it's going to be interesting to see that team's performance. I'm really looking forward to next season. Like, I can't overstate that enough with the new entries that we've got coming in and the new calendar and stuff. It just all brings together a match. We'll see if it's made in heaven. We'll see how that match is. But for right now, it seems like a nice fit. It's a nice puzzle piece set into the future of 23XI racing, Kyle.
Yeah, and the other kind of trickle-down effect of this is it kind of makes it seem like we're almost at the confirmation point where Jason Ratcliffe will be going to the 20 with Christopher Bell as well. That's kind of been up in the air whether he would go over to the 20, whether Chris Gale would stay in the 20, and what would happen with Ratcliffe. But given Wheeler is the one going to the 23 car next year and not Ratcliffe or even Chris Gale, and the fact that he was in like a competition role, an executive role last year with Toyota. Was he with JGR last year or Levi?
I believe so.
I can't remember.
I believe it was with JGR.
Regardless. It does seem like Chris Gale is probably on the out at the 20 as crew chief, and they'll continue that Jason Ratcliffe, Christopher Bell relationship. We'll see how that does next year in the 20, but that's kind of that trickle-down effect of you had two basically crew chiefs in Toyota that were unconfirmed for next year, at least at the Cup Series level, in Ratcliffe and Gale, and it's Wheeler, who was previously in the 95 that gets that gig. So interesting, that trickle-down effect. But yeah, I think Wheeler is a very, very solid hire.
I could see Ratcliffe going and taking whatever Wheeler's position was this past season. I don't know. I don't know if there's necessarily any advantage to having Ratcliffe or Gale. I think you've seen the effects of just having been that fourth car at JGR. I don't know if it's necessarily on Gale's performance that the 20 car has been so off on some occasions. But definitely you want that familiarity probably to move over to a new setting. It's not like Ratcliffe is not familiar with JGR by any means. He was over there for many years with Matt Kenseth. And even before that, he worked with Kyle in the Xfinity Series and is a mainstay with the Toyota camp. So I could see it going both ways for that open spot for Christopher Bell for next season. But I think they're both solid candidates. But I think if you're going to lean one way, it would be Ratcliffe. But I imagine you feel similar on that.
Yeah, I think it's more. I think it's definitely more likely that Ratcliffe is there. I just don't think that you bring him up to the Cup Series level, or bring him back up, to the Cup Series level with Christopher Bell in the 95, push Wheeler up to that executive role, only for when he goes over to the 20 to then keep Chris Gale, who, regardless as to the external factors, that 20 team has underperformed to this point, given JGR's expectations. So I would be surprised if Chris Gale is still the crew chief of the 20 next year. I just think it's more likely that Ratcliffe just comes over, which is a little bit surprising that hasn't been confirmed yet, who the crew chief of the 20 is going to be yet. But
they usually announce that at the same time with all JGR. They just released it in one big statement. So there's definitely a lot of things that could be up at the air over at JGR. Who knows with Adam Stevens and Kyle Busch, right?
Just look back to the Colburn bomb that dropped last offseason.
So they usually kind of wait to see who wants to leave, basically, is what it comes down to.
But to that point, that's kind of why I'm surprised that Mike Wheeler little nugget there kind of dropped this past week as well, because I was kind of expecting all of the Toyota camp to kind of be announced at the same time rather than this one kind of being earlier than expected.
They usually wait until the season finale. I remember when they lost Wheeler, they did it like basically before Homestead. They announced it with Hamlin, and then a week and a half later or something, they announced Gayhart was going to be the new crew chief for him. But there's definitely some musical chairs that could happen over at JGR with their crew chief lineup. It's definitely been a disappointing season probably as an organization as a whole compared to the record-setting year that they had last season. It's been a dip in performance, that's for sure, on both Truex's side of things and Kyle's. Hamlin has really stepped up to the plate on the win total. And then obviously Jones has gone winless this season. So There's definitely some questions to be answered over at JGR, and this Wheeler thing kind of stirs the pot even more on what they want to do for next season. But I'm sure we'll get an announcement within a matter of weeks or even a month's time or something like that before they go into the off season, so they have a good understanding of what's going to happen for their lineup next season. But for now, we've got Mike Wheeler stepping back over to the crew chiefing side of things, and I think it's going to be a great relationship there with Bubba Wallace. So any final thoughts there, Kyle, before we move on?
Yeah, no, just very, very excited to see Wheeler back atop the pit box. And I think that maybe not necessarily out of the gate, because brand new team, we just don't know what to expect the first few races. But I would expect at the very least by season's end that's going to be a competitive team. And I think that Wheeler is a great, great hire. Experienced crew chief, has had success both with a top-level JGR team and also with a secondary 95 team a couple seasons ago. So very, very big fan of that decision to put Wheeler atop the pit box for Bubba Wallace next year.
I'm in complete agreement. So we'll move on here to the Hendrick Motorsports side of things. Just something quickly that they announced today. They're doing a special tribute to Jimmie Johnson this upcoming weekend, as we all probably anticipated. We still have not seen what Jimmie Johnson's running for a final paint scheme. I imagine they're going to do something special. I'm going to be disappointed if they're not. I just want to say that right off the bat. Like, they have to do something this week to pay tribute to Jimmie Johnson's career. But for his teammates and Chase Elliott, who had a pretty big weekend in himself, William Byron and Alex Bowman, they will be running a special yellow neon, the famous yellow neon that Jimmie Johnson won so many championships along with Jeff Gordon. It's just that infamous bright neon yellow number that Hendrick Motorsports has become synonymous with. They're running that on all three cars, so it's going to be a nice little tribute that they're giving him this weekend. I mean, they kind of did it during the throwback weekend where they paid tribute to his big paint schemes over the years. Bowman's nailed it out of the park, and then Chase Elliott's one was nice as well. Disappointed Byron didn't go with a championship car. I'm still disappointed by that, but I wish they kind of did maybe another kind of because he's got still more championships they could have put paint schemes on. He had 7 of them, so they had the opportunity to, but this is a nice little touch going into Jimmie Johnson's final Cup Series race in all likelihood in his career, which is crazy to think. It's disappointing.
I don't want to think about it yet.
No, it's going to be I'm very curious to see and how the broadcast wants to play it, how they want to close out those final laps. They're obviously going to focus on crowning a champion, and whoever's that battle, if it's close, even if it's not, I hope, that they take the time to focus on Jimmie Johnson periodically throughout the race, whether he's having a good day or a bad day. I'd hope he completes all of the laps.
Oh, yeah, let's hope he finishes the race first off.
And has no issues, which has not been easy for the 48 team the past couple of seasons, to say the least. But I'm pumped that I'm not really pumped. That's the wrong word. I'm just kind of reminiscing, I guess, over Jimmie Johnson's career. I'm gonna definitely make a graphic on him for sure later this week, just to pay tribute to everything he's done for the sport. But just your thoughts about, I guess, Jimmie Johnson, and then just them running a special tribute to the great 7-time champion that he is.
Yeah, no, I think it's a nice, probably subtle, but probably also not way to pay tribute to him in that final race. I would have been disappointed if there wasn't anything, that's for damn sure. And a certain number 9 car maybe wants to go out and do a little something extra to pay tribute to Mr. 7-time over there. That would
I don't know what you're talking about.
That'd be kind of wild. We haven't talked about it yet, so I have to be. No, I'm kidding. But to that point, though, and it's great seeing Jimmie Johnson get all the love, but I would like to see maybe SHR do something special for Clint Boyer there over there as well.
They released their paint schemes already. I'm disappointed. They didn't do anything special. They're probably just going to put a freaking sticker on it. Like, thank you, Boyer. Come on. Boyer didn't even get a throwback. I would have loved to see a Jack Daniels paint scheme.
Oh, my God, yes.
What that would have been. So many missed opportunities there. I feel like you left it too late. You should have announced it sooner so they could have got a wrap together. But
well, that being said, they do have all of like the almost like contingency sponsors all over the place, which is kind of cool. All of his past sponsors.
Yeah, on the decklet they have got which is cool. All of his sponsors. But
yeah, it's great seeing Johnson get all the love. Don't get me wrong, and he absolutely deserves it. But I'm a little bit sad for Boyer over there.
I hope he doesn't get forgotten this weekend too.
Yeah, hasn't gotten as much love, and obviously is not the same driver as Jimmie Johnson. Very few are. But he's been great in NASCAR in his own right. He's been a character. He's a fan favorite. So I hope that he gets some love as well this weekend.
Yeah, it's disappointing when you look at, the likes of Matt Kenseth, Jimmie Johnson, or Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt Jr.,
yeah.
Tony Stewart. Like, you think of all those big names that have retired, and they've got like that special tribute paint scheme at the end of their career kind of thing to tie it back to, whether it's their rookie season or just to kind of sum up their career as a whole. It's disappointing to see that Clint Bowyer's not getting that in his final race, but I'm happy that they're at least having the sponsors on the car. I hope that thing doesn't get smashed in or anything. I would love to just see it in one piece at the end of the race. But
and hey, who knows? Maybe Matt Kenseth gets like his 4th final throwback car.
Yeah, we'll see on that. If this is the end for Matt Kenseth, which I imagine it will be.
Yeah, I feel pretty confident about it this time.
But if it's not, boy oh boy, Matt never wants to leave the sport. He's going to be a Mark Martin essentially.
Oh man.
But we've got a lot of people to say goodbye to this weekend, which is going to be kind of sad to see. And then we've also got champions to crown this weekend as well, which is crazy to say. But I'm very happy that they're running some sort of tribute to Jimmie Johnson. I'm hoping that the paint scheme that blows me away that they have for his final race, because I'm hoping that they have something recognizing his lowest days and the successful years of his career. Allies kind of jinxed him, just kind of ever since they've come on the car. Kind of been a little iffy on that front, but all jokes aside, it's going to be we'll talk about all of that later on this week, kind of previewing the Phoenix finales, and we'll talk about what to expect and what our favorite memories are, or something like that later this week of many legendary people in the sport, and we're going to be sad to see them go, that's for sure. So quickly on next season as well, on the NASCAR Cup Series side of things, they are preparing, it seems, to reduce capacity for the Daytona 500 for next season. Nothing's been confirmed or anything, but it's definitely going in that direction. And once things are rumored in this sport, it seems like it's basically confirmation in a sense. So the Super Bowl is running 20% capacity is what it seems to be. And I think NASCAR is trying to mirror that in some ways. So obviously with the pandemic still going to be going on in February, there's no doubt about that. It's definitely the right call to try and reduce capacity and kind of limit the damages that could transpire from an event like that, Kyle.
Yeah, it is Florida, so who the hell knows? But I'm glad to see that they're at least planning towards that 20%. We'll see what things are like come February next year. My hopes are not all that high, if I'm being honest at this point. But we'll see what happens. Any kind of fan presence, if it's safe, is great to see, especially at an event like the 500. So we'll see what happens. And I would imagine they basically take whatever happens at the Super Bowl and just apply it to their event.
Yeah, for sure. Going to be an interesting 2021 Daytona 500, that's for sure, when that rolls around. So we'll move on here to the Xfinity Series side of things. That's the Cup Series news done and dusted. Just quickly to wrap up things with the NASCAR Xfinity side of things, we've got Justin Allgaier officially coming back to Junior Motorsports for next season. It was now announced this morning that his longtime sponsor in Brandt Construction, I think it's construction, I believe.
I think so.
But nonetheless, Justin Allgaier, a mainstay in the Xfinity Series, has been for many, many seasons. He had that brief spell in the Cup Series for Turner Scott Motorsports, if I'm not mistaken, I think back in 2015 or something like that. And he's been with Junior Motorsports ever since, and they've had great success together. And Brandt's been with him for a long, long time, and they're continuing that partnership for 20 races next season.
Yeah, I just checked here. Brandt is agriculture stuff, so there we go.
I knew it as soon as I said it.
Swinging a miss on that one.
I remember seeing the farm on their bright
had
orange
like
car.
a thank the farmers scheme. There's a. It's okay. Swinging a miss.
Damn.
But no. Getting back on topic here. It just makes sense, right? He's one of the most successful drivers in Junior Motorsports history. Going to look for that championship this season. We'll see if he's able to pull that one off at a track where he's historically been fantastic at.
He was my championship pick.
Exactly. You stole it from me. But we'll see. We'll see how things go there. But yeah, just makes sense. So Allgaier and Gragson confirmed back for Junior Motorsports. We know that the 8 as well is going to be a rotation car once again, with Josh Berry essentially getting the first half of the season. Dale Jr. almost certainly at the Martinsville event, which is kind of funny, him taking away one of the short tracks from the short track guy. And then Sam Mayer taking over once he turns 18, which only leaves the one car now. We'll see if Michael Annett returns or if there's maybe something funny that happens there. I would be surprised.
Michael Annett's not going anywhere.
Michael Annett's probably not going anywhere, which pains me to say. But who knows? Maybe we get a wild card and maybe we get like a full season of Jeb Burton or something. I'm not holding out my hopes for it, but I think we all know how both of us feel about Michael Annett taking up a Junior Motorsports spot. But great to see Allgaier return. It's been a great marriage there. No reason to leave that. He's been great at that program. Had a couple run-ins with Noah Gragson this year, but all that being said, fantastic decision to bring him back, and I think it just makes sense for everybody involved.
Gotta love some internal competition within your own organization. Exactly. You gotta have a little bit of that. It's definitely great to see Justin Allgaier, the probably the veteran, I guess, of that series for many years now, is going to continue to be that. I wonder if he's going to become the next Elliott Sadler in some respects, where he just kind of stays down there and kind of never really comes up. He had his stint there, and then that's basically it for him. It kind of seems like a similar timeline for Allgaier here, but nonetheless, he will be interesting to watch here, coming down to Phoenix in a couple days' time, and we'll see if he gets away with his first Xfinity Series championship. We'll talk about him a little later on. And on the Truck Series side of things, to wrap up the NASCAR news portion of this episode, we've got Austin Hill returning to Hattori Motorsports for next season in the number 16 truck, and will continue to run part-time in the Xfinity Series as well in the 61 car, I guess it is, for next season as well. Similar to what he did this season, it's not really changing in any respect. Obviously, Austin Hill, we'll talk about him later on in the show as well. What happened to him at Martinsville? Definitely not the season they wanted to end it on, but Hattori Motorsports has become a mainstay in the Truck Series, has won a championship with Brett Moffitt 2 seasons ago, and it seemed like Austin Hill was set for a championship run this season. He did everything right, the regular season champion, and we'll talk about how his season ended in a little bit, but this is a great move, I think, for that entire organization. Hill was a bit of a risk. We discussed that way back when on Spirit Live when that news was announced, but he seems to have really come into his own here in the Truck Series, especially at that program. He's become a race winner on multiple occasions since he's come over to this team, and it's disappointing to see how his season ended, but there's definitely a lot of prospect for next season. He goes into next season probably one of the championship favorites, if not the championship favorite, when you look at the body of work that he's had over the past 2 seasons, Kyle.
Yeah, again, this is just a move that makes sense. It didn't look like Austin Hill was going to be getting any promotions to the Xfinity Series level, at least with anybody competitive. So stay in that Truck Series program. They're a program as well that kind of splits time with MBM in that Xfinity Series. So they basically get to pick and choose which races they run while also running for the owner championship as well. So it's just a strong move for Austin Hill. I think it's best for his development as well. He's definitely not a young driver, but he's still one that has some promise and could do things at different levels in the future potentially. So just a move that makes sense. Won the regular season championship, as you mentioned, will be in contention just slightly behind Brett Moffitt for the overall season-long points championship there. Obviously, heartbreak this past weekend not being in the Final Four there, but still lots to build on for next year. And looks to be another championship threat next year, and hopefully we get to see him in more Xfinity races as well, where he's kind of been up and down. You look at Talladega and kind of the mistake he did there that kind of screwed over Riley Herbst, but then you also look back a couple weeks in the last couple weeks, with a solid top 5 run, I believe it was recently.
I think it's something like that.
Top 5 at what was it, Vegas a few weeks back?
I couldn't tell you. I can check.
Regardless, Hattori's had some strong runs recently with Austin Hill at the
Kansas
at the Xfinity Series level. Was it Kansas that they had the top 5 at?
Kansas,
so there you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, a great decision for Hill, I think, because then he continues to run full-time in the trucks in what is maybe the most competitive series in NASCAR, for being honest, while also getting spot starts and more experience in the Xfinity level. So great decision for everybody.
Yeah, I've really come to love that entire organization there ever since that kind of the swan song season with Brett Moffitt. That entire Hattori Motorsports team has really taken a hold of that series, and for being a single truck organization, they've done wonders for Toyota and have given a great, building block for a lot of with Brett Moffitt and Austin Hill specifically for their future careers. And hopefully we get to see a championship for Austin Hill, or at least a Final Four appearance, which he should have had probably the last 2 seasons come to fruition here next season. So that's the NASCAR side of things. We'll briefly talk about here the Formula One silly season, Kyle, as kind of a bit of a shocker in some respects, I'd say. Kimi Raikkonen, widely rumored to return. He is returning for 2021. That guy will never leave the sport. He's just awesome. But his teammate, Antonio Giovinazzi, will also return to Alfa Romeo next season. There was definitely speculation on someone like Mick Schumacher or Callum Ilott taking that spot from Giovinazzi for next season, and that just leaves one Ferrari-powered team for next season open with a spot for one of the Ferrari Junior Academy drivers, including the likes of Schumacher and Ilott, to take that spot. It's definitely an interesting kind of decision here by Alfa Romeo. I like Giovinazzi. He hasn't really maybe panned out as well as we would have anticipated when he had that one off season, and the past 2 seasons have been hit or miss. He's just been kind of second to Raikkonen. But I think he deserves a shot still in F1, but next season will be his final straw if he doesn't get sacked, maybe mid-season next season, if he doesn't get the results. But definitely an interesting decision here for just Ferrari as an entire manufacturer to make this decision, because they ultimately have the say, as we've talked about on this show, with Alfa Romeo having that one Ferrari Junior Academy seat there, specifically for one of their drivers, and Giovinazzi currently holds it. We didn't know if they were going to decide to switch things up for next season, but they ultimately decide that Alfa Romeo's pairing of Raikkonen and Giovinazzi are good enough for 2021, Kyle.
Yeah, and this is one that really surprised me, to be quite frank. I really thought that Mick Schumacher was going to be paired with Kimi Raikkonen next year at, obviously, Alfa Romeo. I think Raikkonen was one that most of us felt pretty safe about. If Raikkonen wanted to return, he would return. He's just a great teammate to have for anybody coming into that second seat. Just the amount of experience he has is just unmatched. Obviously, he's the most experienced driver in F1 history, so you can't do much better than that. But the Giovinazzi one does surprise me quite a bit. When you just look at the pipeline of drivers that Ferrari has right now at the F2 level, there's a lot of names there and not a lot of seats to put them in at the F1 level, and whether that's Mick Schumacher, Callum Ilott, Robert Schwartzman, there's a handful of drivers there that could or are F1 caliber drivers as soon as next year. And I thought that one of them would at least end up in that Ferrari Junior seat at Alfa Romeo, which, it's a decision. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. But that being said, I do think that Antonio Giovinazzi is a solid driver. We've seen what he's been able to do off the starts and on the first laps. He's been remarkable on those. But if you look at the long-term future, do you really see a future for Giovinazzi at the highest being Ferrari? I think that basically everybody at this point would say no. So if you look at the pipeline here, what's more valuable, having one more season of Giovinazzi at Alfa Romeo, or getting Schumacher, Ilott, Schwartzman, whatever you decide to go with, at Alfa Romeo? For me personally, I think it's more valuable to have one of Schumacher and Ilott, one at Alfa Romeo, and one at Haas if you can do it. And only having one of those go into F1 next year is probably disappointing to me. And I think that both of them are definitely ready to make that next step. So when I look at one of those Ferrari Junior seats being taken by Giovinazzi, I just kind of scratch my head and wonder what the thought process is there. And obviously it remains to be seen who ends up where. It seems almost certain now that Mick Schumacher will end up at Haas. But then what happens with Ilott? What happens with Schwartzman? We'll see what happens with those guys. But I'm definitely surprised by that decision.
Yeah, I would agree. if they were going to do something, I wouldn't have been surprised if they put Mick in Giovinazzi's seat and then Gio went to Haas for next season. I think that would have made some sense as well.
Even something like that would make sense. Because I feel like Haas does have the 2 open seats, so if he did something where Schumacher pairs with Raikkonen and gets that experience at Alfa Romeo, Giovinazzi switches over to Haas and then pairs with somebody, it seems likely that'll be Mazepin. So even then, I just don't get it.
I think part of it maybe came down to the Italian driver and the Italian car, and
that's probably an underrated aspect.
I think that's a great tie with that kind of brand that they built over there. Adds probably a lot of marketing dollars to have an Italian F1 driver driving an Italian powered car. That can't probably be understated enough, but. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised in some respects, but at the same time, I am. I hope Schumacher is at least in Formula One next season because it would be great to see a Schumacher on the F1 grid. And if it is at Haas, that's great news for an American team having a name such as Schumacher in their stable driving their car. Whether that's a great season to be on the horizon for that team is yet to be seen. But I think he probably would have learned, Schumacher that is, more at Alfa Romeo than he will at Haas when they're kind of in a rebuilding or retooling phase or whatever you want to describe it as. I think Alfa Romeo probably would have been more well suited for him to kind of be his first step into Formula One. But if they feel like this is the best for Schumacher's development, or Isla, let's not forget about him as well, they could go that route. But I think either or, you can't go wrong with the talent that they both have. So it's definitely a bit of a head scratcher in some cases, like you said, and in some others it makes sense in terms of maybe that ethnicity that Giovinazzi brings to that team. So it leaves a lot to be kind of desired to kind of find out for the remainder of silly season over there in F1. Spots are starting to wind down, starting to get more full as the days go on. Interesting from Lewis Hamilton after the race this past weekend as well. He doesn't know if he's going to be back next season. I don't know if that necessarily means like his tires are going off, how he says it over the radio every time, but he miraculously finds a way to come back and win the race. But there's definitely maybe a bit of opportunity there at the Mercedes seat for next season. Who knows? But I would sorry. Okay. I'm just saying, if Lewis does retire,
he's not. No, we're not entertaining this. We're not entertaining this.
I don't want it to happen. I don't want it to happen. Okay.
We're not entertaining it.
I will move on. So any final thoughts on the Giovinazzi and Raikkonen side of things, Kyle? Because I clearly can't talk about that other thing.
No, I'm not. No, I will not allow. No, that we're not doing that. No.
I don't want it to happen either. Okay.
No. We will not speak of that until the day it is confirmed. That's all I will say.
What is confirmed?
The thing.
Okay.
I'm not saying it.
I want to see if you catch it there.
You tried. I
tried.
But yeah, no. Look, I like Gio as a driver. I think that he fits really well at Alfa Romeo. But given that kind of dynamic of the team where it's one driver that they get to choose and then one Ferrari junior, I just don't get why Ferrari, as the people making the decision, would keep Giovinazzi there instead of one of their junior drivers. If it's Alfa Romeo making the decision, I think, you probably stick with Raikkonen and Gio because that's probably the lineup that gets you the best results next year. You don't have to worry about a driver coming in a rookie season and trying to learn things. So maybe Alfa Romeo has more say in that second seat than we maybe anticipated. I don't know. Maybe Ferrari has something hidden up their sleeve for some of their junior drivers, and we'll see what happens there. But at least for now, just given what we know and what's been speculated, weird decision.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to end it. We'll see what Haas does for their driver lineup. Obviously, Nikita Mazepin has been widely rumored as that kind of first guy that's in there. They seem to favor him a lot, which is an interesting decision when you look at some names that are out there. But as Kyle just motioned there with the money gesture, it makes a lot of sense in that regard. So we'll move on from Formula One, Kyle. That's the entire news and notes section of that. We'll finish off here with a quick announcement that SRX, the racing series that we have come to love as the announcements have kind of trickled throughout the fall and the summer seasons. They have finalized.
Had a bit of a dry spell recently with the lack of announcements, but it seems like we're getting some good ones soon.
Yeah, they've finalized their 2022 2021, schedule. We don't know what's going to be on it, but they have finalized it. They had tweeted that out today, so we'll see what happens on that schedule. We don't really have any rumors or insight into what they could really put on that.
They definitely like the tease. I got to be honest.
I think they have great social media coordinators. Whoever's doing that, they deserve a raise. I think they're doing a tremendous job in kind of keeping us guessing week in and week out. But this series is something that we're going to talk about next summer, definitely, whenever they have races on. And it's going to be a fun racing series, I'm sure, with the cast of characters that they have lined up taking the wheel. And the car that's been pictured out there and everything that they've done with going back to some great tracks, it seems like maybe Knoxville's on there, Nashville Fairgrounds is potentially on there as well. There's a lot to be gained for that series, just going back to kind of the roots of racing in some respects, hopefully for next season. So there's not really too much to discuss on that front. No announcement of what the schedule is going to look like, but I think it's going to be fun no matter what they put on the calendar. I'm just really pumped that CBS has got on board with it, a new kind of broadcasting partner and kind of the racing scene, I guess. First time in a long time since CBS has kind of been on that front as well. So any quick thoughts there on the SRX Racing Series before we move into the highly anticipated Martinsville Cup Series recap?
I just hope that they have a couple fun things hidden up their sleeve and we get some fun race dates, some midweek stuff, I believe is the plan. Some Wednesday night racing, I think, is what they originally said would be. And hopefully we get some fun tracks because obviously the Xfinity one left us a little bit disappointed with the standalone stuff. But hopefully we get some different stuff, some unique short tracks, maybe even some dirt stuff. Who the hell knows? So I'm very excited to see what they have coming here soon.
Yep. And that does it for the news and notes portion of today's episode. And oh boy, Kyle, the main event of the weekend did not disappoint whatsoever, especially in the closing stages of this one. We went into this weekend, just to give a bit of context, basically just deciphering between two guys who could win below the cutoff line. And at points throughout this entire race, all four of them looked like they could have a shot at winning this thing, which was crazy to think. And I don't really know where to start with this one. I'm going to be honest. This is something that I never would have thought possible, the end result of it. I like the first couple of stages, some great racing. I don't really want to dive into it too much because the finishes, the last 30 laps or so was really what got, the final stage especially was what really, really enticed me. I'm sure for you as well and everybody else sitting at home and watching it. So I'll quickly go through the first couple of stages here before we get into the meat of things at the end of the race. So this was a caution-filled race, I'd say, in some respects. We didn't really see long periods of green flag running. We had cautions periodically throughout, whether that was the infamous back markers taking some time and having about 10 different cautions throughout the race. We texted about that. It's
we did.
Definitely a conversation to be had about some of these guys on the track, but nonetheless, we had a little bit of controversy early on, Clint Blair gets spun by his teammate Eric Almirola. Another caution there. Austin Dillon would kind of had nowhere to go in it, but that was Boyer would recover, and so did Almirola as well. Boyer did give Almirola a bit of a shot on a restart later on to return the favor in some respect, but they both recovered to get top 10 finishes. We'll talk about them in a minute. Ryan Blaney was also caught for speeding, a guy that we both had in our fantasy lineups during that competition caution on lap 60. He would be sent to the back for the speeding penalty. And then probably the biggest story, obviously, throughout the entire race, Kyle, Kevin Harvick struggling for the majority of this race.
Goodness.
Basically, that first stint, he looked decent. Top 10, didn't really fall back too much. Seemed like he had some competitive speed. But after that competition caution, that 4-car was probably the worst I've seen it ever since he's come over to SHR since 2014. I can't remember the last time I've ever seen the 4-car miss a setup that bad with Rodney Childers atop of the pit box and Kevin Harvick behind the wheel. It was something to behold. He went into this race plus 42 above the cutoff line. We'll talk about how that all broke down in a bit, but Kevin Harvick's struggles early, Kyle, was the big story throughout the entire race, as it didn't just end in stage one. It carried on for the vast majority of this event.
They were brutal. Like, they were legitimately bad to the point where some of the issues that started happening later on as well were impacted because they were racing Matt Kenseth for position in 2020. that's not a good thing. This was, man, we knew going into the weekend, or we expected, we knew going into the weekend that Martinsville isn't a track that this team has necessarily been good at in the past. They've been fine, but they haven't
good.
been.
I wouldn't say they've even bad. I feel like they're top 10.
They've been like
every
8
time.
to 12, 8 to 12, which is for most teams great, but for that team is a little bit behind the 8 ball to say. But man, they were like 20th on back at the beginning of that race. They had no drive off of the corner. I couldn't tell what was going on. Just I couldn't tell if it was a power thing. I couldn't tell if it was just the car was way too tight. But man, it took way too long to fix that car and make it remotely competitive, which they did end up doing by the end of the race. But at that point, it was too little too late.
But, it was close. It was pretty damn close how close they got to making it. But we'll talk about him at length of what happened. But just briefly there, the first stage struggles continued on.
They were awful.
We'll talk about how it all developed for him, but just your initial thoughts there obviously was they were brutal. There's no other word really to describe it. So there was different pit strategies as well in that first stage. I liked it. I thought it was great racing. They had guys that some pit strategy where some guys would pit and then some guys would save a set and then vice versa. It would all kind of equal out at the end of the race where they had equal sets of tires. Some ran out, including Ryan.
Some early aggression as well.
Yeah, I liked what I saw early on, and definitely you look at the guys like Denny Hamlin was really aggressive early on, making some bold moves into especially turn 3, not leaving anything to second guess. And with that aggressive driving, Denny Hamlin wins stage 1 at Martinsville. He did a fabulous job with the pit strategy with Chris Gabehart. They nailed it perfectly, when to pit, when not to pit, and they got the right tire cycle at the end of it where he gets the stage win. Remember, he went into this race only 2 points ahead of Brad Keselowski, with the possibility of someone, in all likelihood, below the cutoff line. You look at the likes of Martin Truex Jr. and Chase Elliott especially, that could bump one of those guys down. So it became a 2-point margin, and it seemed like that would maybe be the big point in the race, that Hamlin is starting to outpoint Keselowski, who had a great stage as well. He finished third with Alex Bowman splitting the pair in second. Bowman had a phenomenal first couple of stages. He was great. Beautiful paint scheme, the Planners paint scheme there. It was just a great mix of the navy blue and the yellow. Just had to give that a quick shout out because I love that paint scheme. But Chase Elliott also there in fourth, keeping his nose in the mix of things. Logano already advanced to the championship for. The only guy who felt safe probably the entire race and the entire field was Joey Logano, and he brings it home fifth in the first stage. Martin Truex Jr. in sixth. He was on that rough pit strategy there. He had pitted early on, and then a couple of the leaders, including Hamlin and Bowman and Keselowski, had pitted after him. So then he had the lesser of the fresh tires at the end of that stage. So he was in position to win that stage, but then he just kind of got rammed through the field in some respects, just fell back to sixth. And then Kyle Busch in seventh, William Byron eighth, Kurt Busch ninth, was in the mix of things as well throughout that first stage, and he would get the lead on that next stage, which we'll talk about. And then Jimmie Johnson rounds up the top 10 after coming from, I think it was like 31st or something like that. Johnson had a really great first stage. Seemed like he had the speed that he had in the spring. It carried over to the fall race here. So that was the first stage. Definitely some very interesting storylines to get us right off the bat. It didn't evolve as the race went on. It really started from the get-go, and it was a great race overall. Your impressions after the first stage, Kyle, as we had the points battle between Hamlin and Keselowski looking like the big thing, but also the speed from Truex and Elliott definitely gave the competition some worry.
Yeah, it was basically shaping up to be the race that everyone was hoping it would be, where Truex and Elliott, the two guys in must-win scenarios that had legitimate resumes where they could go out and win this race, were doing just that up at the front, which created the excellent cutoff line that we were kind of looking at between Keselowski and Hamlin. So it was all shaping up to be great. The racing was great. It was basically everything you would hope for a Martinsville cutoff race at that point.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more there. And then the Busch brothers would stay out at the end of that to the stage to take the lead. Kurt Busch would actually get the lead from Kyle on the outside lane. Looked like that one car had some pretty impressive speed.
Yeah,
Not something that
I
expected going into this weekend. Didn't expect the speed by any means that he had, but he was in contention very much so throughout the entire race. Then probably one of the weirder ones, Chris Buescher's nose was just absolutely torn to shreds and left out an entire layer of fluid around the entire racetrack because it happened in turn 3 and 4 and then went down the full front stretch, 1 and 2, the back stretch, and then down pit road. Like he covered the entire track in fluid. So they had quite the time cleaning that all up. But once they did, Chase Elliott would get back to the lead. He had a tremendously fast car throughout the entire event, but certain circumstances would prevent him from leading at some point in time. But he probably had the fastest car on Sunday evening, whatever you want to describe it, as it went from the day to night transition, which was nice. They had an earlier start time than they usually have for the Martinsville race, but with the daylight savings time, it kind of bumped that night race part of it into effect of things. So we got kind of a mix of the day to night transition, which I'm always a big fan of. So as I said there, Elliott back to the lead, and then one of the biggest moments of the race, Kevin Harvick is forced to make a green flag pit stop for a flat left rear tire after contact with Matt Kenseth. He goes 2 laps down as a result of that contact. Luckily for him, it was kind of relatively early on in the stage so that the field wasn't so spread out, but still 2 laps nonetheless is a big margin to make up for Kevin Harvick. But luckily for him, maybe one of the luckiest cautions of the day, Brennan Poole hits the outside wall, bringing out the caution. The 4 car would take the wave around, so he would get back to within 1 lap of the lead cars as the lead car himself, Chase Elliott, just dominated that second stage, and he would go on to win it ahead of Martin Truex Jr., who was right there in tow with him throughout that entire second stage. Denny Hamlin 3rd, Ryan Blaney 4th, Kurt Busch 5th, Kyle Busch 6th, Brad Keselowski 7th, so definitely lost a little bit of ground there once again to Hamlin if it did come down to that points margin. And then Logano 8th, Bowman 9th, kind of struggled there in that second stage a little bit, but they regained their form. And then Ryan Newman just in there again in the top 10. So Newman was definitely a storyline as the race wound down as well. So 2 stages are in the book, Kyle, and Kevin Harvick has no stage points to his name, and his competition with Brad Keselowski and Denny Hamlin have plenty of it.
Yeah, and it was kind of to the point where it looked like it was all but over for him, essentially, because he just couldn't get that last lap back. And whether it was untimely cautions just at the wrong time, you look at Timmy Hill getting the free pass instead of him at one point, and then you look at when it was later on, so I won't get to it just yet, but it was just basically everything that could go wrong had gone wrong, with the exception of that first caution where he got the free pass. So he made up 1 lap, but it was still tough sledding at that point. And with the stage points of everybody else, it was looking like it was a clean slate, and it was basically just going to be who's going to finish best in this final stage, get the finishing points, and who's going to come out on top. Because it did at that point look like one of Truex or Elliott was going to win the race and just throw a big wrench into things into the playoff picture.
Yeah, everybody had to plan after that second stage, whether you were in or outside that cutoff line, that one person outside of that cutoff line coming in was going to win the race, because it didn't seem like there was anybody else besides Elliott and Truex. And then you probably add Blaney into the mix there as he really stepped it up late in that second stage, where I kept him in my garage by mistake. But the third stage happened and everything went to crap, so you couldn't really predict what was going to happen there. But definitely, it seemed like it was a 2-horse race between Elliott and Truex until that point, and it carried on throughout the remainder of the event. But at the stage 2 caution break, Denny Hamlin would have to come back down pit road to tighten lug nuts after having a top 5 car the entire day, winning his stage, getting 3rd it was in the second stage. He went to the back, and it never really regained the speed that it had prior to that. It was kind of tough going for the 11 car after that penalty. He made his way up through the field. We'll talk about him at length in a bit here as well, but that was really what set the 11 car behind the 8 ball, which put him in a position where he was nervous in the closing laps as well. So in the final stage here, Kevin Harvick was about to go 2 laps down, but this is probably the luckiest caution of the day, as Timmy Hill would prevent that from happening. Good old Timmy Hill. What a story his season has been, both on iRacing and at the track in some respects. He brings out the caution, so that prevents Harvick from going that 2 laps down once again. If that had happened, his race is entirely over by no stretch of the imagination. Harvick's playoff hopes were done, but this caution kind of saved him and kept his playoff hopes alive. But during this caution break, Chase Elliott would lose the race off pit road and drop 4 spots because of a topic of discussion I would like to get into a little bit here, Kyle.
Here we go.
Chase Elliott's jackman, TJ Semke, was claimed to jump over the wall too soon, a penalty that we haven't seen as much over the past season or two, but it was very prominent in the previous seasons where the jackman would come over to the wall a little bit too soon before the car was within one pit stall of getting to their pit stall. And TJ Semke knew the rule book, and he jumped over the wall too soon. He knew it, and then he went back to the wall and kind of springed off of it, and then went back and serviced the car. So that's why Chase Elliott lost those spots. NASCAR gave him a penalty initially for the jumping over the wall too soon, but then rescinded that penalty after reviewing the incident. And I would love to get into this a little bit here, Kyle, because I didn't know that. First off, I didn't know that this was a rule where you could reset yourself to go back.
Neither did I.
And I don't think many people did. And this is the second time, in my opinion, Chase Elliott has gotten away with a little bit of stuff in these playoffs, thinking back to Kansas with the radio incidents. So I would love to get into this a little bit because I think you have a different opinion than I do on this one. But I love to get your thoughts here first.
It's just rare. We don't
usually do share the same opinion.
Yeah.
But Kyle, you definitely have a little bit of explanation to kind of give me here to maybe sway my opinion before I get my take. But I know that you think this was an MVP caliber move by the jackman TJ Semke.
Yeah, and really, regardless as to your thought as to whether it was legal or not, at the end of the day, NASCAR did decide that it was legal, him resetting it, and in turn, that caused them to go from starting 21st or 22nd to starting 5th, I believe it was, on that restart. Because
I guess it would be 5th.
Yeah, 4th out, and then LaJoie was up front there, which was funny. So yeah, that saved their season. Full stop. If he's starting 22nd or 21st there, they are not winning that race if it plays out the exact same whatsoever. But instead, he resets, and they stay up front. They get the lead eventually, and they go out and win the race. Bob Pockrass tweeted out the actual rule book, the actual rule, and this is what it says. And this is basically where I'm coming from here. And you can debate whether the rule is written properly or not, but this is what it actually says.
If it was even a thing before the Chase Elliott thing, but no, I'm just kidding.
Quote, crew members' feet and or pit equipment must not touch the pit road surface before the vehicle is one pit box away from its assigned pit box or the equivalent marked distance. Makes sense.
Of course.
That's the rule that everybody knows. That's the rule that he broke originally. It goes on to say, quote, should a crew member's feet prematurely touch the pit road surface prior to servicing the vehicle, said crew member or members can reestablish their position back to or behind service wall prior to servicing the vehicle, to avoid a penalty. The way that the rule is written, it says that all you need to do is go back to the wall, which Semke did, before he serviced the vehicle, which he did. To me, this is pretty clear. This is not a penalty to me because he went back, he reset based off of the way that the rule is written, and they did not gain anything from him going over the wall too early. In fact, him going back and resetting cost them positions. It was another slow stop. They came off, they lost position. At the end of the day, I see it as something legal, and I like this rule. You can debate whether you like the rule, whether the way it's written, all this kind of stuff. But to me, this is a legal move, and it's one that saved their season.
I don't think he reset his position, though. That is my thing about it. I don't think he reset his position.
He went back and got to the wall, though.
Resetting position to me is when you have 2 feet on the wall where you initially start, which is your starting position, right? So he's starting on the wall with 2 feet on it, right? So then he goes and springs off of the wall with 1 foot while half of his body is still in the pit stall. That's not resetting his position to me, in my opinion. I don't think that he did enough to justify that not being a penalty. Great on him for thinking about it to even know the rule in the first place, but I don't think that's a total reset of his initial position. I don't know. There's not really much I can really add to that. It's just my opinion. I don't know if many other people feel that way, but I just think he got away with a little bit there where it didn't cost him too much in the end. Obviously, Chase Elliott lost a couple of spots because of the having to go back and everything and service the car. But at the end of the day, when you look at his starting position where you start on the wall and then you take that one big step off of the wall, I don't think he reset his position enough to justify that as resetting his position as written in the rule book. So that's where I stand on it. I think Chase Elliott's penalty should have still been given to him. I don't think it should have been rescinded, but that's just me. I mean, even if it's Kyle or anybody else, I still think he didn't reset his position enough to justify him not getting a penalty there. But I don't know. Do you think he did? I'm just curious.
To me, a penalty should be given out because of two reasons. One, you gained from something that is against the rule book, or it's something that endangers somebody. And in this situation, the rule is written so that, one, crew members aren't over too early so that they could potentially be hit by cars going by, but also so that you can't be out there right away and then service the car quickly. In this case, he jumped over too early, went back before any cars were by, so it wasn't a safety issue, and they lost time on pit road anyway, so they didn't gain anything. To me, that doesn't deserve a penalty then. You can debate whether he reset it properly or not, sure, but to me, he went back to the wall. As the rule's written, it doesn't say anything about 2 feet or anything. The way the rule is written in the rule book is that all it says is get back to the wall or behind the service wall. That's exactly what he did, in my opinion, there. So I think that it's a great, savvy move from TJ Semke that saved them the season, and in fact, put them along the season, because if Elliott isn't starting fifth there, they're not winning the race and not battling for a championship in less than a week's time.
Man, I just disagree. I don't know. The key word in that rule is reset, right? Like, I feel like you have to go back to your initial spot. That's what reset really means, right? Like, I know it doesn't specifically say that, but resetting goes from when you restart a video game, you go to the initial part of the action. You don't just kind of
that's restart, not reset.
Reset is the same thing as restart.
Hey, if I reset to the track in F1 2020, I'm just going back to the middle of the track. I'm not starting back at the finish line.
Yeah, but reset is the place where you left, correct?
Yeah, right? And he went back to the place he left.
Yeah, but he didn't go to the full extent where he left. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't on top of the wall. That's a reset. Bouncing off of it like just like a kangaroo does not count as resetting to me. I don't know.
To me, it does.
That's just my opinion. I think it's totally up for judgment on how you want to view it.
For the way that the rule is written, I think he did enough. If you want him to reset his position further, I think that you just simply have to make it so that they're back behind the wall. Maybe that's the way that you rewrite the rule in the offseason or something. If you didn't like the way.
They don't start behind the wall necessarily when they start their pit stop, though, right?
But then that would be the only way to clearly say that he's reset his position. I don't think that. You
could just say 2 feet on the wall, too. I think that's probably a reset. That's where he started.
I feel like that might end up being more dangerous to the crew members then.
I feel like it's entirely dangerous in itself that he's able to reset his position. I feel like that just causes more danger because he's run out, then he has to run back, and a car's coming at him that's probably not that far away, and he's carrying, a 80-pound jack, whatever it is, 50-pound jack, whatever it is, and he's carrying that, lugging it around, jumping off of walls, going over to service the car, and then having to run back. I think that in itself is a little bit unsafe, in my opinion, when you look at the other rules that they have in place for safety. I don't think he should be able to go in front of the car, then go back, and then come back, and then he has to go around the car kind of thing. I think that's even more unsafe in my opinion, but
and maybe that is what you go down and you don't allow those resets. But if you do allow the resets and you do allow them to get back there, I'm perfectly fine with what he did there. And I perfectly understand where you're coming from. I just feel like he did enough in that situation, and that's exactly what you would want based off of the way that the rule is written for that exactly to go down. If somebody either accidentally falls off the wall before and they reset their position, or if they jump over too quickly and get back, I think that's exactly the way that you would want it to play out if somebody goes over too soon. You don't lose enormous amounts of time, but you do lose some time, and you don't get penalized afterwards because he did reset his position, in my opinion. So I applaud TJ Semke, because at the end of the day, regardless as to what either of us think as to whether he did reset or not, NASCAR's the one that their decision's the one that matters, and they decided to side with TJ Semke on that one and save their season. So I'm actually on NASCAR's side of this, which is a rare occurrence when it comes to rules being enforced and whatnot. But based off it, I just have to go off of the way that the rule is written, and for me, they basically did it as good as you could have hoped for based off the way that the rule is written.
I can understand why they made the call that they did. You know, it's not like it's foreign to me why they would make that call. It's
at the very,
I think it's just up for a debate in how you want to view it. Like, I think there's definitely people that see it the way I'm seeing it, where he didn't reset. And then there's definitely probably the majority where they feel like he did reset, because probably they're Chase Elliott fans, because they don't want to see him lose that track position. But B, in itself, I think he probably did enough in some cases. It's just, I don't know if he entirely did enough for me to justify that he reset his position. I think that's just the thing that it's really bothering me about it, where they say reset. I think resetting is where you start from your initial start point and you go back on top of the wall 2 feet. If he had done that, I've got no problem with him doing what he did. But I feel like he was just too quick on how he did it. But that's just me. But it's definitely up to interpretation on how you want to view it.
Yeah, I think the final thing here is NASCAR set a precedent, and we kind of talked about it at Talladega with all the chaos that was.
Jesus,
all we care about is consistency with the calls. And if this is the precedent that they've set, if this happens at Phoenix and somebody jumps over too early,
this is crazy. That's even in the rule book. Like, I can't believe that's a rule.
You need to call it the exact same way here, because if you don't call it the same way, then the Chase Elliott bias or whatever, then I'll hear a legitimate argument for that. Just as the same as I think that's probably a fair case to make back with the radio issues that he had. I think, if he's, maybe it's a playoff bias
pretty
thing.
Lucky. He's had a good run of 8. I'll say that. Like,
he's had a nice little run, but at least for this one, I'm on the side of NASCAR. But I will completely switch back over if the next time that something like this happens, they call against the pit crew member. If they do a very similar thing where they jump over too early, recognize it, go back, kick off, and they still give them the penalty, then my opinion will change. But it remains to be seen if that happens. And if it does, I will gladly clip up this clip, go back, and prove myself wrong. But as we stand here today, as we sit here today.
If we stand, we're screwed for this show.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on the side of NASCAR.
All right. I respect your opinion.
I respect yours as well.
Thank you. I think there's definitely an argument to be heard on both sides. Yeah. And ultimately, Chase Elliott
definitely not black or white.
No, it's definitely not. There's definitely a little bit of a gray in the middle there, in that gradient kind of thing on Photoshop. I think there's definitely a little bit of room for a decision there, but they decided to go with the Jackman himself and TJ Semke, and this was probably a race-saving move. Not race-winning, but race-saving move for that entire number 9 team. So I'm glad we had that discussion. I've been wanting to talk about that for about
me too.
Now, I guess, but it's going to be fun to see in the future if this does come back to haunt you here with the Halloween spirit.
Honestly, it probably will, because knowing NASCAR and the rule calls, they are anything but consistent.
I'm just I can't believe that that's even a rule in the first place. Just to finish that off,
surprised as well.
I can't believe 2 things. I can't believe it's a rule, and 2, that he knew the rule. That it's that he remembered that in the adrenaline rush that he's going through. He's like, oh yeah, I just got to go back to the wall and reset my position, in quote unquote, and then go back and service the car. And he ends up staying in the top 5 at the end of things there with Chase Elliott. So we'll move on here to the final 100 laps, because this is where, if you didn't think the first part was interesting, we've got more in store. As James Davison, another backmarker car, just trundling along, decides to bring out the caution with exactly 100 laps to go. And this is to the benefit of Kevin Harvick once again, as he was back to 1 lap down. He's now got the free pass. He was not really battling anyone at that point in time. There were so many cautions throughout the race that there wasn't too many cars a lap down at that point in time. So Harvick gets back on the lead lap. And at that point in time, it seemed like they improved the handling of that number 4 car, as he was running about the late teens, I'd say, amongst those kind of drivers. So it seemed like Harvick maybe had a shot here, as he was outside of the point situation at that point in time with a or a driver below the cutoff line coming into this race, leading the race. So it was going to be touch and go here for the Ford team as they work their way back up through the field. So on that caution, Brad Keselowski gets caught for speeding on pit road. He doesn't understand how he got the penalty at that point. And he's got obviously the basically direct outage from the pit stall there. He got caught for speeding on pit road. And then also on that ensuing pit stop, Chase Elliott lost 7 spots as well. So it put the 9 car back. I think it was to around 11th place or something like that in that race, because he hadn't really worked his way up from that penalty up to the lead again. He was still staying roughly around 4th place there. And then Brad Keselowski, though, that's the big one, as he was kind of the only guy that didn't have any problems up to that point that was above the cutoff line coming into this race. Disaster kind of struck there for that 2 team, it seemed, and he was going to have to battle back. He was my pick to win the race. He had probably race-winning speed when you look at the body of work that he did for the remainder of the 100 laps left in the race, but definitely a game changer, it seemed, at that point, Kyle.
Yeah, it seemed like if he was able just to hold his position, that they would be at least very, very comfortable, even if Elliott or Truex went out and won the race. And instead, he goes all the way back, and he's got to fight to make it through. And he's got to pass as many cars as he can, because every single one of those points matters. And it was just another curveball thrown into this amazingly insane short track race that just made it so entertaining.
And then on that, the great part about it was Harvick had gotten the free pass, so they were both going through the field at the same
They started side by side.
Yeah, and you got to see the difference in speed and the caliber of car that each driver had at that point in time, which was very, very key in the result of this race, as Brad Keselowski tore through the field, and we'll talk about him in just a little bit. But on that ensuing restart, Martin Truex Jr. goes back to the lead for the first time since I think it was basically stage 1. He had kind of been in that top 5 range, but he seemed like he was starting to pick up the pace there later on in the races. He took the lead on the outside on the restart. And then another caution would hit as William Byron, last year's second-place finisher in this race, would smash the rear end of that car into the wall after losing brakes, I think he said on Twitter as well. They didn't really say on the broadcast, but it seemed like he lost brakes there. So that brought out another caution as the leaders pit. And Corey LaJoie stays out, the only guy to stay out to mess with the front of the pack. And he was very antsy to get going there, to say the least. And he ended up getting a restart violation because of it, because he went too early on in the restart box. But
let him have it, damn it. Let him have it.
No, but this kind of thing, I've got a huge problem with it, where the guy stays out, the only guy on old tires, and it's a championship caliber race kind of thing. It's seasons on the line. You're not really racing for anything. I know Go Fast is in their final couple of races in their final full-time season, it seems, in the sport. But I've seen this in the Xfinity Series. I remember back to in the 14 car. I remember, it's blanking on me right now, but Eric Jones.
Who was it?
Shoot, I can't believe I'm missing this up.
Cole Witt? Was
it might have been Cole Witt. That's the one that really bugged me, right? When you think back to that one with the Daniel Suarez championship and Eric Jones getting stuck on the outside lane, I think it was Cole Witt. It must be Cole Witt. That sounds right to me. But yeah.
But I'll jump in here. This one's different to me because they didn't have any tires left. So coming down pit road was meaningless for them.
Potato, okay? In some case, but you look at some other guys, they had no tires left too, and they didn't decide to stay out. They decided to come down pit road.
They probably had scuffs. And
you don't think LaJoie has scuffs?
Probably not, because they don't have any money.
Scuffs and other people have scuffs. No, everybody has scuffs. They don't have money. Oh, don't even with the money thing. They've got money to burn at this point right now. They're not looking at funding for next season. Not money for next season. Come on, like they're kind of.
Hey, that Trump sponsorship ends tomorrow night, probably. So I don't think he needs to. He doesn't need a campaign for re-election past tomorrow. So.
Oh God, that's hilarious. That's a good point. But yeah, I think it was Cole Witt to bring that back to that one. That's the kind of thing that really bugs me. Like where the guys just like do it at any other point in the season. No, it's just all right. Moving on from that, LaJoie would fall back, and we won't talk about him for the remainder of the race. But here we go, Kyle. Martin Truex Jr. leading on that restart, takes the lead from LaJoie. And then disaster strikes for the number 19 team as he's got a loose wheel. Another pit mistake for the number 19 and Martin Truex Jr. It's been a common theme over the past couple of seasons.
Don't remind me.
I know. I don't want to rub it in too much, but
it's okay. I've done it plenty of times.
For Truex, he was running second at that point, but before that, he was in the lead and he had a loose right front tire. The car just would not turn in the center of the corner, And as a result, he would have to come down pit road to fix it, and he would be out of contention for a championship 4 spot. The guy you picked to win this weekend, and how could you not really coming into this weekend, winning 2 straight times at Martinsville and looking on pace to win this weekend as well, finishing second to Kyle Busch at Texas last weekend. What a big difference that would be in the playoff scheme of things. Like, there's so many different variables and elements to the final 50 laps of this race that can come down to it. And the first one to really kind of kick things off with eliminating, a guy from contention was this pit mistake by Truex. And they had a phenomenal pit stop, got him out there first. It was just that little bit too quick that really cost Martin Truex Jr. a shot at the championship this season, Kyle.
Yeah, and it's another tough one to swallow there, because at the very least, he would have been within 6 seconds of Chase Elliott. We know that. And we knew as well that 19 car, really heated up in the middle of the run as well. So it would have been very interesting to see.
He had a good 30-lap stint every run kind of thing, where he was just lights out. So, yeah, go.
And we were robbed of it, which is unfortunate to see. But at this time of the year, especially in those must-win scenarios, you got to be borderline perfect. And they weren't perfect when they needed to be. And you look back to past championship races and everything. Obviously, last year, the finale stands out, of course, with the pit mistake, putting the tires on the wrong side there. And this is another pit mistake that you can look back to and say what could have been for Martin Truex Jr. in his age 39 season, statistically the peak of a driver's career. Probably a missed opportunity, which is unfortunate to say here. But you look at the 20 points
in this one.
Yeah, you look at the 20-point penalty there for the illegal spoiler, and then the loose wheel here, and it all comes unraveling for Truex, and it's not any of his fault. Which is unfortunate to say. You hate seeing it when the driver isn't able to do anything about it. But at the end of the day, it's a crew chief mistake, trying to do too much with the spoiler, gets that confiscated, and gets suspended for a race, but most importantly, loses 20 points when you've got 3 races to try and make it up. And then a crew member mistake as well. Nothing Truex can do there. You could hear him over the radio apologizing. There was just nothing he could do at that point. They tried to hold on to it as long as they could, but was just too little too late as well to try and come back from a mistake as well. If that happened in the first stage or even the second stage, you could look and maybe you could come back from that. But at that point of the race, it was too late. And Truex, as soon as you heard the loose wheel over the radio, you know that their day was done.
Yeah, it was just unfortunate. It's sad. You don't want to see that to anybody, especially someone like Truex who gave it his all. He put himself in the right position. If he doesn't have that problem, it's going to be one heck of a battle between himself and Elliott for that last spot to get it in, because they were the only 2 guys that really had control of the race at any point in time. It was, I would have loved to have seen that battle at the end of the race between himself and Elliott, but it was not to be, as Elliott took the lead from there. But it presented itself with an incredible last 20, 25 laps of this race, Kyle. The split screen, oh boy, it was. They were
working it. I felt bad for that switcher. They were working it.
Intense stuff. I got a picture of it here with 20 laps to go. It was the 3 guys that came into this race, the highest on points in Harvick, Hamlin, and Keselowski. They were separated by 2 points. Hamlin was +2, Keselowski +1, and Harvick -1 with 20 laps to go. I was losing my mind. As someone, I'm a diehard Kyle Busch fan, but I was appreciating the moment as much as I could, because this was insane. I can't wrap my head around it still, what happened in those closing laps. But what were you feeling before we get into how it all broke down? I can't imagine what you were feeling, probably similar to me, but I was losing my mind.
Yeah, you're a Kyle Busch guy and you were freaking out. Well, I'm basically a true neutral, and I was freaking out, man. It was amazing. It was everything you could hope for, based off of the format that they run in a championship cutoff race, going into the championship race, It's everything you could have hoped for at Martinsville. They were all near each other as well. The cutoff line was changing basically every lap, with one guy passing a car and everything involved there. Chase Elliott was on his own island out there up front.
Oh, yeah.
Which was amazing as well, because then we got to focus in on that cut line. We didn't have to worry about a battle for the lead or anything like that.
If we did, I can only imagine. The screens.
I can only imagine if they had to try and put the leader in the box and then have like all three other cars. Man, it was chaos. But this is what you would hope for a Martinsville cutoff race. It was beautiful. It was fantastic. And it's a good thing that it was only like the last 30, 40 laps that happened. Because if that was the entire race that was that intense, I probably wouldn't be here talking right now. I'd probably be in the hospital.
It was just a crazy mix of emotions on Keselowski was going forwards after having that speeding penalty. He was a man on a mission going through the field, worked his way all the way up to fourth place at the end of it.
Harvick at least looked decent.
Keselowski. Yeah, and then Harvick was trying to go forward. For the first time in the race, he wasn't going backwards. He was going forwards in this one. And then Hamlin was trying everything he could to not fall back. Yeah. And luckily for him, he had a couple of teammates behind him to kind of cushion the blow from behind in terms of threats. So to give a bit of context here, Chase Elliott wins at Martinsville, as we've talked about, kind of hinted throughout the entire episode. Chase Elliott clinches his first championship 4 appearance in his career.
First Elliott to win at Martinsville.
Yeah, that's interesting as well. I didn't know that. Chase Elliott, obviously, an incredible performance, led over 200 laps in the race, was dominant, definitely had the best car. He's shown signs throughout the past year at Martinsville that he has some speed here or there, just hasn't been able to put it all together. Obviously, that infamous 2017 last couple of laps there comes to mind with the spin with Hamlin. But besides that, he's been in the top 10, in top 5 at points in his career, and he put it all together. And I didn't think Chase Elliott was really that clutch, really, until this moment in time. 6.5 second lead at the end of this race. Like, he pulled away from the field and never looked back at the end of it. Ryan Blaney, I thought, had a chance at some points in the race, but let his best friend kind of get away with it there as he led the Penske trio that was in second, third, and fourth with Blaney, Logano, and Keselowski. But the last lap did not end with Chase Elliott crossing the finish line, Kyle. It was touch and go. It was between Hamlin and Harvick. Who would have thought coming into this race, the two guys that have dominated the season by far, the two best cars, without a doubt, no argument there. Harvick on the outside looking in and Hamlin just narrowly above. It came down to kind of 2 points, with Kevin Harvick getting past Matt DiBenedetto and then setting his sights on Kyle Busch in 9th place, and Denny Hamlin having his kind of buffer there, and Eric Jones and his teammate behind him. And it was insane to watch. And in the last-ditch effort, Kevin Harvick spins Kyle Busch out of turn 4, but as a result, spins himself in the process. Kyle Busch does an incredible 360. He finds a way to get involved in these things every single time. I don't know how he does it, but he does. And he spins himself, Harvick does. Busch crosses the line and finishes 9th in the spot he entered the final corner in. He exits the final corner even with a spin, and Harvick ends up back into the outside wall, or into the inside wall, ending a shot of making it onto the championship 4. And Hamlin was lucky enough to have his teammate and Eric Jones behind him so that he would not pass after explicit instructions over Jones's radio to not pass the 11. I was listening to Kyle's radio, as I always do for every race, and he was told, you cannot let the 4 car pass. Well, he did everything in his power to not do that, and Harvick ended up costing himself a win, or a chance at a win for a championship in Phoenix. I don't know what the heck happened. I cannot believe we're sitting here today, a day after the Martinsville race, and we're talking about a guy that won 9 races this season in Kevin Harvick not making the championship 4. This is the biggest upset I've ever seen in probably all my years of watching NASCAR ever. For 13 years, I don't think I've ever seen someone basically as sure of Kevin Harvick as I was that he was making it to the championship 4, with the body of work that he had put together over the season, the dominant car week in and week out. If he didn't win, it was a shock. He had never gone for more than 5 races during the season to not win a race. It was incredible dominance by the number 4 team and Rodney Childers and Kevin Harvick and the entire SHR team there. And to not make it there is the biggest disappointment, I'm sure, for all of those guys on that team and for Kevin Harvick himself. I can't believe it. I can't believe how it all unfolded. Team orders kind of came into play when NASCAR likes to keep it clean. They put an investigation out over Jones's radio over the past 24 hours to try and conclude anything. They came away with saying that Jones's radio was clean and he did nothing wrong, which can be up for debate in some respects. I'd like to kind of discuss that as well. But just your thoughts about Kevin Harvick, the big dog of the season, the championship favorite throughout basically since we've come back from the pandemic break. He's been on a roll week in and week out, and he is not in the championship four and has a shot for his second career Cup title.
Yeah, this is okay. And when I say this, it's going to sound bad, but give me a second to explain myself afterwards. But this is kind of the moment that NASCAR has been waiting for. They've wanted, based off of the format, for somebody to go in as the clear-cut favorite, run into trouble, and then miss out. This is exactly what they've been wanting. They want to be like the rest of North American pro sports, where you can go in after an amazing regular season, go into the playoffs, and completely choke it away. You look at, say, like the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2019 when they ran away with the President's Trophy, went into the playoffs, and got swept in the first round. NASCAR has wanted something like this to create the artificial, I guess you would say, entertainment factor that most motorsports don't have because they don't have a playoff format. Well, NASCAR does, and this is exactly the kind of moment that they've been wanting, and they finally got it at Martinsville, and the entertainment factor was amazing. I won't deny them that. I was entertained. Now, I would have been entertained regardless of the format, I think. But the format being the way that it was caused mass chaos in those last final few laps. I won't deny that. And that's exactly what NASCAR wants with this format. That being said, it devalues the championship, just full stop. And you can hear it from many a quote, whether it's Kevin Harvick saying immediately after the race that these are not the same championships that Petty and Earnhardt won, whether it's him saying that he would rather win 9 races in the season and miss out on the championship than have a season where you have less wins, but you go and win a championship. He prefers the kind of season that he had. You have people like Martin Truex Jr. afterwards being asked essentially, what are your thoughts on this? Him calling it insane. Somebody asking, well, is it okay to have this insane stuff? And him going, it's not my decision to make. It devalues the championship at the end of the day. And it's kind of like I won't say it outright, but it seems like kind of the crossroads opportunity here for NASCAR for them to double down on this format and stick with it for long term, or for them to recognize that maybe this isn't the best way to name a champion, and for the next gen of car coming in, maybe they make changes. I highly doubt that happens. But this is what NASCAR's been waiting for. They got their Game 7 moment where the overwhelming favorite choked, and it leaves a better taste in my mouth for sure for the championship itself, but for the entertainment in kind of its own thing, I don't think you could ask for anything more for a penultimate race to a season to be any more entertaining.
Yeah, I've got a lot of different things going through my mind right now.
Yeah.
In my opinion, Kevin Harvick is the 2020 champion. I'm going to say that straight out. I think he is the overwhelming champion by many people. I don't think that there's any argument on everything that he's done this season. Just listen to these stats, okay? In 35 starts this season, he has 9 wins, 20 top 5s, 26 top 10s, no DNFs. He won 7 stages and 67 playoff points coming into this. So in any other year of this format, he's a lock, and he was this season as well. I don't think anybody on their playoff bracket did not have Kevin Harvick in their championship four.
Before
no
this race, I tweeted out, I can't wait for this, 2 playoff spots up for grabs.
No, well, I was going to tweet back. I was going to tweet back and be like, what about Harvick? But I didn't, because I'm like, oh, that's even stupid. So, I don't know what else they want. It's a great point. It's a great discussion that we need to have here, because it is – I like this playoff format. I'm going to be completely transparent. I like it. I think when he says the things that he said after the race, where it's not the same championships that Petty and Earnhardt won, sure, they aren't, because it's not a season-long kind of points format. But at the same time, I think these championships probably are one of the hardest things to ever earn in any sports, in my opinion, because it even though it's 3-week chunks is what it comes down to kind of end your season, you have to be so consistent no matter how well you've done in the regular season, no matter how well you've done in the playoffs. It all comes down to those kind of clutch moments. And we've seen in previous years where some guys have choked it away, but this one is definitely the one that comes to mind the most, obviously, not just because it just happened yesterday, but it probably will be, for as long as this playoff format goes on, the biggest upset in NASCAR playoffs history, really. This was his championship to lose, going into a place where he dominated for his entire career. I just wanted to say this. NBC tweeted this out. The most wins in a single season without winning a title since 1985. Kevin Harvick is on a very elite list here to join some very big names. The likes of Bill Elliott in 1985 with 11 wins. Jeff Gordon, 10 wins in 1996. Rusty Wallace in 1993 with 10 wins. Kevin Harvick and Carl Edwards tied at 9 wins with their season this season with Kevin Harvick, and then Carl Edwards in the 2008 season. So I think that comes down to it as well. Those guys didn't win the championships as well when they had the most wins. It's in that kind of format as well. When you look at Elliott and Gordon specifically, they didn't really have a playoff format then. So I think that kind of argument where it's not the same championships that Petty and Earnhardt won. Well, even with the wins and stuff that they had in those seasons, they didn't win the championship as well. It just comes down to that consistency. And unfortunately for Kevin Harvick, they picked the absolute worst time to have the most inconsistent run of their season. And it was not really any of his own doing per se. Texas, you look at that with the mist and probably getting into that PJ1 and just losing control, and was the first one to hit it, is what he said. And that deterred any chance of him getting a good race there. And if he gets even a 10th place finish in that race, he doesn't go into those final couple of laps needing what he needs to do. It comes down to NASCAR not making the penalty on Denny Hamlin at Talladega when he crossed below the double yellow line to pass those 5 extra points. Hamlin is on the outside looking in those final laps and is going to be more desperate than defending. He's going to be on the offensive, while Harvick can probably take it a little easier at that point in time. All of these little things culminate to what that specific last couple of laps led to. And I just am at a loss for words at the disappointment I have as a fan for watching this entire season and seeing Kevin Harvick dominate and how much passion and how much work he put into this season. This was his best shot to win a championship for the rest of his career, in my opinion. This is it. I think Kevin Harvick won't win a championship now in his rest of his Cup Series career. It's coming down to the end of it. He's signed until 2023. But when you look at the likes of who struggled this season, namely Kyle Busch, who is out of contention, this was his shot to win it. And I don't imagine the 18 car is going to be this poor again next season. So this was his shot with the talent that he had around him. You go against the likes of Keselowski, Logano, Hamlin, and Harvick. That's a great championship for that. I would love to have Harvick's odds on, with how well he's done in the past at Phoenix and against that kind of competition in a championship race. But when it comes down to it, they kind of choked it away. They came with a bad setup, and they were playing catch up basically after that after the competition caution, and they never recovered. So, credit to him for trying to give everything he had until the last lap and then some. It just didn't pay off. But I think in the heat of the moment when he says those kind of things with the Petty and Earnhardt championship, it's just his emotions. I don't know if he necessarily means that in some respects, because the championships that are being won now are incredibly difficult. Going into a one-off race where you have to perform at your best over a 10-week stretch is incredibly difficult, and it's not easy to win. And I think NASCAR has proven that with the lack of multiple championships from a one singular driver in this format. We've had a lot of variety throughout this entire format since it's been implemented since 2014. And then if you even want to look at since the stage points were introduced, we haven't had a same champion since then. So we could have that definitely next weekend with Logano getting his second championship in the current stage era. But when it comes down to it, Kevin Harvick just kind of choked this one away. But just go back and forth here, I guess, but any thoughts to what I said or any other kind of thoughts on Kevin Harvick as a whole here?
I actually disagree on the fact that it's a quote unquote harder championship to win now. I think it's a luckier championship to win now. Just given, I feel like it's more difficult to run consistently fantastic over a 36 race span than it is to have an issue in a 3 race span that decides your fate. And I look at the difference between those amazing seasons in terms of wins that you mentioned there, such as Bill Elliott winning 11 races in 1985 but not winning the championship. Well, he didn't win the championship because although he won 11 races, Dale Waltrip that season was consistently better than him in terms of average finish. You look at the stats that season, a 7.3 average finish for Dale Waltrip. Sure, he only had 3 wins to 11 wins, but Bill Elliott had 18 top 10s to Waltrip's 21 and an average finish of 8.7, and that's why he ended up losing that championship. Kevin Harvick, on the other hand, has a 7.3 average finish to go with 9 wins. He has the most wins in the series, and he also has the best average finish in the series, and he would have wrapped up the championship if it was the same format or just season-long points format after Texas. So when I'm looking at this, I think that it's more difficult and shows a more deserving champion if it's season long. And sure, you can argue the difficulty of it. But when I'm looking at playoffs here, it feels artificial because when that race was coming down to the end of it and I'm watching it and I'm going, oh my God, this is insane. I'm also at the same time going, this also kind of sucks because we're not going to get a really deserving champion. A deserving champion to me is somebody who's, at least in motorsports, is somebody who's been consistently good from the first lap of the first race to the last lap of the last race. And we see that in basically every other motorsport except for NASCAR because they're trying to be like the rest of North American pro sports. The difference between motorsports and the rest of pro sports is that you're racing against the same people in every single race versus pro sports when you're playing a different team every single night and you play different teams different amounts. You look at soccer, and MLS is excluded here because MLS kind of falls into the same trope that NASCAR has where it's trying to be North American versus kind of its roots. You look at what soccer is, especially in Europe and everywhere other than North America. You play one team twice a season. You play each team twice a season, and at the end of the season, the team with the most points wins the championship. It's the same format like NASCAR used to be and what every other motorsport is, where it's season-long champion. You can't do that in North American pro sports specifically because you don't play the same teams the same amount. In the NHL, Eastern Conference teams play Western Conference teams a different amount. Same for NBA. In NFL, you don't play every single team in a season. So you have to have these playoff formats. NASCAR doesn't need a playoff format. You have a playoff format to kind of artificially introduce these Game 7 situations, as NASCAR likes to say, and artificially introduce these entertainment factors. We all loved Stewart versus Edwards and at Homestead because it's something that we don't get to see every year. Forcing these kind of Game 7 situations on us every single year takes away from that kind of added factor of, man, we don't get to see this every time because we know we're going to see it every single year. So it kind of takes that special factor away from it. At least it does for me. Even in stick and ball sports where you have playoffs, you don't get Game 7s every single year. You get maybe 1 or 2 Game 7s over the course of the playoffs, and certainly not every single time for the championship. Just like this season when I don't think we had any Game 7s across any of the major championships. NBA Final, quite frankly, wasn't all that close. I believe it ended in, 5 games? NHL, Stanley Cup Finals ended in 6. MLB ended in 6, I believe, as well. None of those went to 7 there. And that's why we appreciate the Game 7s then because we don't get them every single year. With this format, we're forced to Game 7 every year, and it, to me, devalues the championship. And to the drivers, it clearly does as well. Just look at Kevin Harvick, as I mentioned earlier, saying he would rather win as many races in the season as he did than win the championship. You just can't devalue a championship like that to me. And I understand where you're coming from for sure. But to me, and I look over even back to the Chase format, I want to see in motorsports a season-long champion. And then I understand why maybe that isn't necessarily a possibility for the entertainment factor and for TV and everything now. But I look at IndyCar and I look at F1 and MotoGP and everybody else that has the season-long format, and I go, that person deserves the championship. Scott Dixon this year, if it's a playoff format, that guy's out in like the round of 12 based off the way he ended the season. But over the entire season, he was the best. He had an amazing start to the season, kind of fell off a little bit in kind of that beginning of the second half, and then finished the season strong, did what he needed to do to win the championship. Lewis Hamilton is doing Lewis Hamilton things, of course, in Formula One. But you can point to all those guys who have won IndyCar championships recently, F1 championships, and go, those guys deserve it. If you look back over the last few years of NASCAR and you look at guys who didn't win the season-long championship in terms of points, but won the championship because they made the Final Four and they won the final race, I don't think you can point to the guy and go, that guy deserves the championship nearly as much, especially this year when Kevin Harvick, the guy who had the season-long championship in terms of points, wrapped up with 3 races to go, and he's not even in the final race to race for that championship.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand what you're saying, but I disagree. I love the playoff format. I think it's definitely brought a totally new aspect to it. As you say, it is kind of artificial in some cases, but I think the regular season really does matter in this playoff format, especially because of the stage wins and the wins, and it all culminates, to this kind of moment here. And usually in any other year, we would have it where not 2 guys coming into this round of 8 below the cutoff line would win a race, and then you battle it out between the 3 best drivers throughout the entire season. But that's what it came down to. Like I said, though, before we started kind of this whole discussion, Kevin Harvick is my champion. No matter what happens next week, I'm going to view it as that. But it's kind of going to be an asterisk next to whoever wins the championship in some respects this season.
And is that not an issue, though? Like, if you're saying that this guy is a champion, but he's not even going to have a chance to race for the championship.
If Hamlin wins it, then I won't, because I think he's probably just as deserving as Harvick.
But what if Harvick goes out and wins the race and he finishes second?
But that's not his fault for messing up here at Martinsville. Like, he did everything he could. Like, it's just the impossible scenario that had to happen last night happened, and that's something that you never see. Like, you could not 99 out of 100, that will not happen again, but it happened.
I don't think it's that high. I don't think it's 99 out of 100 though.
I think it is. I don't think Harvick would ever struggle that much. I don't think I ever would have seen Chase Elliott be that dominant at that point in time. Hamlin to struggle at some points to bring it close, and then having a teammate kind of be his buffer. Keselowski having issues, but then coming back throughout the field. I mean, Harvick went in there plus about 17 points over those guys and then lost it all in the race. Like, it's crazy to think. Like, I would love to know the stat, how many times Harvick was outpointed by those guys throughout the entire season with Keselowski and Hamlin on one race basis. I don't think it's much at all, if any, because I think because Harvick had no DNFs. When you look at the other guys, they had DNFs. Like, I don't think Harvick would have had any sort of opportunity, maybe 1, maybe 2 races where he was outpointed by Keselowski and Hamlin. But besides that, I think it was a 99 out of 100 kind of scenario here that he did not make it to Phoenix. It's just everything had to go wrong for him, and it did. And that's obviously unfortunate because, like we've talked about kind of in the middle part of this season on this show, it would be a shame if neither one of those 2 won the championship this season after everything they've done. We still have a shot with Hamlin in that respect, but with Harvick not being there, there's obviously a missing part of that equation. I don't know. I don't know if I'd really change it, the format, really. We can talk about that in the offseason on what we would think about, what we want to adjust. But at the end of the day, Harvick's not in the championship 4. Chase Elliott is, Joey Logano is, Brad Keselowski is, and Denny Hamlin is. And that's definitely a championship 4. I never would have thought really going into this with Harvick being the guy that's on the outside looking in, but he gave it one heck of a shot. So That was a long kind of conversation, but it was definitely one that needed to be had. But any final thoughts here on that kind of side of things before we move into Cush's threes, notable finishers? We have an Xfinity Truck Series and Formula One race to still recap, but any final thoughts there, Kyle?
Yeah, just finally here, if it was season-long points, Kevin Harvick would be up there with some of the greats. If you look back since 2004, since everything has changed to even just the chase format, and since if it never changes, and if NASCAR, regardless as to how the points are handed out in stage points and everything like that, if at the end of the season the person with the most points from the entire season wins the championship, you're looking at Kevin Harvick with 4 total championships after this year. And instead, he's still at 1, and he doesn't have an opportunity to win another one this year. And I'm just afraid that when he eventually retires here, he will not be thought of as one of these greats, at least compared because of these championships. And I hope that doesn't necessarily hinder his kind of legacy here and anything like that. But when I look, and he's finished the season with the most points in 2010, 2015, 2016, and now 2020, and he has 1 championship to show for it, that leaves a bitter taste in my mouth.
All right. That's fair enough. I mean, I don't disagree with what side you're coming from here. It's obviously disappointing that Harvick's not in the championship but on the opposite side of things, Chase Elliott if Chase Elliott doesn't win that race, Kevin Harvick's in the championship right? Like, it just comes down to that. And unfortunately for Harvick, he just didn't get it done when it mattered most. So congratulations to Chase Elliott on the incredible win, and congratulations to Keselowski and Hamlin for hanging on there late, for however controversial that may be, with Hamlin having a teammate behind him. Kind of similar in some respects, not entirely by any means, but to the MWR Richmond shenanigans there that happened with the Clint Boyer spin, and Brian Vickers having to come down pit road to make Truex get into the playoffs, and then he ultimately didn't get into the playoffs because NASCAR gave penalties. But this is a little bit of a different situation. NASCAR viewed it as there was no penalties because at the end of the day, they probably don't want any penalties at the end of this kind of race. They don't want anything to happen if they even did find anything. But yeah, what a crazy Martinsville race. Hopefully we did it justice there. If you didn't get to watch it, if you're listening here or watching us on the Green Flag on YouTube, it was definitely one for the history book. So we'll look at the notable finishers here quickly. As I mentioned earlier, Blaney, Logano, and Keselowski, second, third, and fourth. Kurt Busch bringing an incredible top 5, staying in the mix there late. Alex Bowman at 6 as well. The guys that needed good runs, they put themselves in a good position there. And it was very, very entertaining, and that added to the extra element of anticipation and drama at the end of it, that's for sure. Eric Almirola finishing 7th, Clint Boyer 8th in his final Martinsville trip. Kyle Busch in 9th after that spin at the end.
Dude, that's honestly one of the most impressive things I've seen this year. I did get a chance to chime in there. He pulled off, I'm talking, if we're going back and thinking about, amazing 360s, I'm talking, the Charles Leclerc one went back when he was at Alfa or Sauber, at the time, I think it was. That amazing 360 he did, that's honestly more impressive than a stock car. I don't know how he did that. That was insane.
He's my driver for a reason, man. That's all I got to say.
Hey, you picked a damn good one.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. Maybe this season is a little bit of a down one, but last week, that one Wednesday, it kind of made up for it.
Look at the cars
season.
Behind you. You're okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. It's all right. Matt DiBenedetto rounds out the top 10 as well. Nice little finish for him. Good for him to finish it there. Denny Hamlin in 11th, Eric Jones in 12th. We've already talked about them at length, so we don't need to discuss that really. Unless you want to chime in there, Kyle, about the Eric Jones thing.
We should just do it quickly. Definitely not as long as the last thing, but just quickly here. If you're going to have a playoff format where every position matters at the end of the race, you have to accept team orders. Full stop. The only exception is if it's an intentional caution and if it's for the win for me. If it's anything like we saw last night, completely okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted Jones to really get past Hamlin.
Oh, I did too. If I'm Jones, I'm
Jones.
way more petty. But
if I'm Jones, I'm not intended. I'm not. I'm not going to be here next year. I don't care.
I would have shot.
What has JGR really done for me here at the end of the day? Like,
if I'm Erik Jones in that situation, I'm putting the bumper to him and like going into like 1 or going into 3.
It was the most frustrating thing I've ever watched.
As I'm going by him on the inside, I'm shooting him the double bird probably.
The double bird. He's driving with no hands on the wheel. No hands on the wheel.
It's been the theme recently, so
yeah, yeah. There's definitely.
Yeah, I don't
a way you could go with that, but at the end of the day, it's just with the way it all rounded out, you can't expect more. It was just funny that JGR was on both ends of the spectrum, needing to get one got wrecked, one was trying to prevent anything else from happening. So a crazy end to that last couple of laps there at Martinsville. Cole Custer in 13th there, the leading rookie in this one. So a decent day there for him. Matt Kenseth, the guy that we talked about a little bit, brings it home 14th, one of his better runs of the season. Matt's coming into the swing of things here as it rounds out the season, but going to be I don't even know what to say about Matt Kenseth really at this point in time. Honestly, I can't really justify anything. 14th for the 42 car. Christopher Bell, the second leading rookie there in 15th place there. He was in there at points in time throughout the race, but was just on the outside of the top 10 really. Ty Dillon in the second to last race for Germain Racing. 16th place, didn't get talked about at all for obvious reasons because of everything else that was happening, but it's 16th place.
This time I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and Kevin Harvick there rounds out in 17th place after crossing the finish line. I think is the last guy on the lead lap is what they kind of scored him as. So unfortunate there for Harvick. Did everything right throughout the entire season. It came down to one spot at Kansas where he couldn't pass Joey Logano that prevented him from making the championship in all reality here. So Martin Truex Jr. in 22nd and Jimmie Johnson in his final Martinsville race, finishing 30th after multiple issues throughout the race. Speeding penalty, damage, flat tire, everything happened to Jimmie Johnson, really. So unfortunate there for him to go out at a track he's been so great at. And then quickly on Truex, obviously pitted there, and then went a lap down with the penalty to fix the loose wheel. So that's the notable finishers here from Martinsville. Kyle, you've been waiting a couple of hours here now, but Cush's threes, take it away.
Yes, I'll make it a quick one as well. Beginning, I won't rehash it at all, but my MVP from the race, most impressive, TJ Semke, for at the very least, knowing the rule book that well, to at least try to get back and see if you could swing it by NASCAR. And I thought he did a superb job there. So I'm giving him a shout out there. Number 2, I was not expecting Kurt Busch to be that competitive this weekend. He was very impressive to me. He did not lose pace with the rest of those guys that needed to win. And while, yes, all the talk was about Truex and Elliott being the guys to win, I was very impressed by Kurt Busch by staying in that top 5 conversation, and Alex Bowman as well. He's not necessarily in Cush's threes because I expected him to be at least a top 10 guy, but Kurt Busch, I was not expecting that good of a run, so he gets a shout out here. And as you mentioned there, 16th place, Ty Dillon, coming down to the end of his career here with Germain Racing at the very least. Great seeing them get a few good runs here as that Geico car will go away for next year. So great to see them get a very solid top 20 finish, almost a top 15 there. Most disappointing for Cush's threes here. An easy pick off the top here, Kevin Harvick. We've talked about it enough, but I don't understand how you can miss the setup that badly and completely ruin your race. If you get a 10th place finish in one of the first 2 stages, you're through. You don't have to worry about anything at all. And instead, they're not racing for a championship here. Say everything you want about the format. Say anything about whatever. They were brutal. They were not good enough. They didn't fix the car until the final run of the race, and by then it was too late. So Kevin Harvick, most disappointing by far. Number 2 here, it's a combined effort. RCR, they did not show up here. Austin Dillon and Tyler Reddick were not good. 22nd and 23rd, I believe, at the end of the day.
I'm not sure what it was, but
not good. They were not. No, disappointed to say the least with that effort this weekend. And finally, not because of his finishing position, just because I wanted to see him give the middle finger, as we said earlier. Erik Jones, I am disappointed that he did not go out and pass Denny Hamlin and say, screw you. I'm not racing for you guys next year. You screwed me over these past couple of years, essentially. I'm going to Richard Petty Motorsports next year. I'm going out and getting the best finish that I can. I would have loved to see it. I think a lot of people agree with me there. We're a little bit sad that we didn't. But at the end of the day, motorsports is small. NASCAR is small. Don't burn your bridges. So I don't hate that decision from Eric Jones either, but I wanted to see him spice it up.
Respect to Eric Jones for being a good teammate to end it all there. Basically, to end his JGR. He's not cutting off any ties. Yeah, I would definitely have punted Hamlin in one of those corners for sure. But that does it for Martinsville. What a crazy Cup Series race, man. And we still have a crazy Truck Series race to kind of quickly recap, Xfinity and Formula One. So any final thoughts on the Cup Series race, Kyle, quickly before we move on?
Never touch Martinsville as the cutoff race. That's all. That's
perfect. That's I ditto. I echo that statement. So we'll move on here to the Truck Series race, Kyle. Before we get into Xfinity, we'll just go in the weekend order here. Quickly, this was the big one. Austin Hill was suffering from engine problems throughout the entire race that ended up taking him out of the race entirely and taking him out of contention for a championship 4 spot. He came into this race the highest on points of the two guys above the cutoff line with Zane Smith and himself, plus 27 for Hill that was. And it's unfortunate for Austin Hill to not be making the championship 4. I'll quickly go through it all and then we'll rehash it at the end. Lots of dirty driving throughout the race as well. Rex, as the laps run down as well. Enfinger spun Krieg because he didn't want to give the lead up. Rhodes spun Lassard because he's you-know-what. And then Moffitt gets collected in that one as well. And then Rhodes and Eckes, as it came down to the end there on the final restart, they beat and banged. And Eckes was having none of it after the ridiculous acts by Rhodes at Texas the last weekend. He got what he deserved, and I'm glad Ben Rhodes is not in the championship 4 after everything that he's done over the past week. Some dirty driving on his part. Enfinger did some dirty stuff too, but he ended up getting away with the win as Grant Enfinger wins in a must-win situation coming into Martinsville, leaves in a championship 4 spot. So that leaves the 3 GMS trucks of Brett Moffitt, Sheldon Creed, Zane Smith, and Grant Enfinger as your championship 4 for the Truck Series that will battle it out on Friday night in Phoenix. So Zane Smith claimed the final spot, as I said there, and he just held off Matt Crafton after he had an incredible night, the second highest point score, or maybe even the highest point score at that point. He was incredible. It came down to 3 points at the end of it, and Zane Smith just did just enough in his first ever start at Martinsville to beat off the veteran in Crafton, the defending series champion, I might add, in Crafton as well. So quite the championship 4 there. None of us got our championship 4 predictions right when these started the rounds. We got them all 3 wrong, as per usual with these kind of predictions, but it is what it is. But first off, unfortunate there for Austin Hill, Kyle, after the regular season champion goes down, and probably a similar kind of thing with Harvick, a guy that should be in the championship 4 is not.
Yeah, just brutal luck. And this is kind of the thing that I'm talking about, where the artificial entertainment of it, if we had season-long points here, Austin Hill, because of that engine issue, would be 4 points back of Brett Moffitt going into the final race here. And also 2 other people would have a shot at the championship as well, in Sheldon Creed and Zane Smith. Longer shots, definitely. But this is kind of the thing where you look at, and if this was season-long championship, you go to this final race for the Truck Series and you're like, this is going to be amazing. Whereas with this format, instead, you know that it's going to be this going in. And yeah, the entertainment value, we've talked about it plenty. I would have just liked to see it. And it's a shame that Austin Hill season ends because of an engine that's supplied to them as well. So hate to see that. But instead, Grant Enfinger goes out, gets the win. Respect him for doing so, for sure. But he's actually the lowest ranked driver out of all the 3 top series in NASCAR to make the final 4 based off of season-long points. He ranks 8th in season-long Truck Series points with 710, behind Eckes, Crafton, Rhodes, Smith, Creed, Hill, and Moffitt. The 2 higher series in the Xfinity Series, which we'll talk about in a second, the lowest rank was 6th, and in the Cup Series, the lowest rank was 5th. So definitely interesting in that regard. We'll see what ThorSport's able to bring out to the table coming into Phoenix, if they can upset GMS here.
Here we go again. We're looking at like last season.
You know what? At least Enfinger's won races this year.
No, he won 4. That's why I'm not upset about that one. That's 4th win of the season. He had a nice body of work. Maybe not the most consistent season. Has had some reliability issues throughout the basically the entire season. But when he's strong, he's pretty good. And he did some dirty stuff to kind of keep the lead. But he did everything he needed to do. Yeah. Jinx, you owe me one. I'm just kidding. But yeah. What do you think? I mean, we'll talk about the championship 4. We'll give our total previews on Thursday in our next episode. But that was just any final thoughts there on the trucks before we move on to Xfinity? Because, I mean, that kind of race recap there that I just gave didn't really sum it up well enough. But it was an incredible race underneath the lights at Martinsville.
Yeah, I think it just put more respect on the Truck Series, essentially. This is the most competitive of the 3 national series in NASCAR here. It's spectacular every single week. You don't know who's going to win. There's a solid 13 trucks that could go out and win, maybe even more, like 14 or 15. Just remarkable stuff in the Truck Series, and I'm expecting a fantastic finale as well. 3 GMS trucks, which is insane. You've got 2 young guys there in Creed and Smith. You've got Moffitt, who's won a championship already, but not with GMS, looking to make the jump up into either the Xfinity or even Cup Series. We don't know what his future holds. And then Enfinger as well, who's a little bit older than the rest of them, but kind of is not as experienced as you would maybe expect for somebody his age, and is going out looking to upset GMS there and get back-to-back championships for ThorSport as well. I cannot wait for this Phoenix race for the Truck Series for sure.
Yeah, I'm pumped. This entire next weekend, it's only
the Truck Series
NASCAR
has
on.
Been so good this year.
It's only NASCAR on next weekend. I'm looking forward to watching every bit of it. But unfortunately for myself, I was not able to watch the Xfinity Series race this past weekend due to it being Halloween and some family stuff coming up. So I didn't really get to see it after the first stage, really. But at the end of the day, Harrison Burton goes back-to-back in the Xfinity Series and wins in NASCAR's Xfinity Series, returned to the paperclip since 2006, like I mentioned off the top of the show. He also breaks his father's record for being the youngest driver to ever win at Martinsville, ever. It's an incredible accomplishment for that entire Burton family, basically sharing that record. I'm sure it was a great moment for Burton.
Finishing 4th as well.
Yeah, a great family day for the Burton household. So congratulations to Harrison Burton upsetting the playoffs once again. It was only Chase Briscoe who made it in on a win to the championship 4 in Phoenix. And it ended up being Austin Cindric, Justin Allgaier, and then Justin Haley. Probably the big shock there across maybe all 3 series in terms of who made it. And he's racing for a championship on Saturday for Colleague Racing, and that means Noah Gragson, Ross Chastain, Brandon Jones, and Ryan Sieg are all eliminated and fail to win or fail to get a shot at the championship on Saturday. So I'm kind of shocked that Haley was able to survive, especially at a track like Martinsville, where I haven't seen the speed on the short tracks from Colleague to say that they would be able to outmatch some of the guys, especially with that tight points battle coming into this race with how close that cutoff line was. But I was expecting maybe a Gragson win and maybe Chastain to make it in on points if that was possible. But at the end of the day, Justin Haley proved me wrong and made it to his first championship 4 appearance. And obviously the likes of Allgaier, Cindric, and Briscoe are not too much of a surprise, but definitely got it wrong once again on the championship 4 predictions with myself having Gragson and you having Chastain. But overall thoughts from the Xfinity Series race. I can't really add too much to it, but yeah, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it was a solid race. It was a great return to Martinsville. Definitely wasn't the chaos that either the Cup Series or the Truck Series was. Was unfortunate there on that last run. Looked like we were going to get a great battle between Burton and AJ Allmendinger for the win. Allmendinger gets a cut tire, has to go down and pit, which was unfortunate to see. But I was surprised too. If a Colleague car was making it through after this weekend, I thought it was going to be Ross Chastain. So props to Justin Haley for doing what he needed to do to get it through, just barely enough there. Unfortunate not to see Chastain in the Final 4 there. But that being said, it's a great mix there of Cindric, Briscoe, Haley, Allgaier. You've got Stewart-Haas, Penske, Junior Motorsports, and Colleague, 4 different teams. Which is awesome to see as well. You've got 4 different drivers at different stages of their careers as well. You've got Allgaier, the veteran of the series, looking to see what he can do in the Final 4 here, maybe win that championship for Junior Motorsports. You've got Austin Cindric, who's going to be going part-time next year in the Cup Series. Chase Briscoe, who's going full-time in the Cup Series next year. And then Justin Haley, of course, who isn't necessarily that top prospect that Cindric or Briscoe is, and being associated directly with a pipeline to either SHR or Penske. but is a great driver in his own right and is looking to make his name potentially Saturday, win a championship and go and see what he can do in the future here. So very excited for this mix of drivers as well. Martinsville was fun. Great to see that they're going there twice next year. As I said, as we've kind of alluded to, Martinsville is fantastic. Leave it alone. Don't touch it where it is in the playoffs, and leave it at 2 days for the Xfinity Series as well.
Yeah, great weekend at Martinsville. They delivered to new heights and definitely remains one of the best tracks across NASCAR's calendar. So definitely going to be ones to watch next season when it's on there twice for all series across the board. So that wraps it up on the NASCAR side of things. Once again, we will have an entire preview for the next weekend here at Phoenix International Raceway in a matter of days here. So hopefully there's limited news over the next couple of days and we can just really get into the championship talk. But until then, we'll move on to Formula One here, Kyle, to wrap up today's episode and their return to Imola. It seems like a theme here. Everybody wants to go back to 2006 as they're racing for the first time Imola since 2006, just like the Xfinity Series did. So we'll start off with qualifying here with the Red Bull mechanics coming up big once again for Max Verstappen as he was having power unit troubles in Q2. And he would be forced to come to the garage before he could complete a lap, and then they had to remove the engine cover, and that's never a good sign. But miraculously, it just seemed like it was a spark plug issue is what I think Christian Horner said after it all ended up happening. And he ended up getting back out on track. That was Verstappen, and completed a Q2 time that would send him into Q3. Obviously, the Red Bull was super fast with Verstappen this weekend. Unfortunate how it all played out. We'll talk about that in a minute. But incredible work by the Red Bull pit crew. And then Valtteri Bottas gets the pole position. Haven't heard that in a little bit, but he outclasses his Mercedes teammate in F1's return to Imola by 0.097 thousandths of a second. Hamilton getting second there, Verstappen third. Pierre Gasly in fourth, an incredible run. A special helmet as well.
He was good in practice too.
Yeah, on that one off practice session as well, like we talked about on Thursday, just doing the one practice session, I guess it is. And then I think that amounted to great racing in the end. I think they didn't know the track as much as they needed to, and you see some slip ups in the race, which you don't normally see, especially on a circuit
that most people aren't familiar with.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was a great combination, and I think Imola delivered. I love the track. I'd never seen it before this, really. I've seen some clips here and there, but it's an incredible circuit, and I hope they come back to this. I know they got Monza, and I don't know how much they want to race in Italy, but they have some great racetracks there. Yeah, so it's an incredible sight to see. But back to Pierre Gasly, he ran a very special tribute helmet, to the late Ayrton Senna, who obviously passed away at this racetrack back when he was driving. I think it was in 1994, if I'm not mistaken. But obviously, it's an emotional weekend for the Senna family, seeing F1 return to that track. But props to Pierre Gasly for paying tribute to him and getting a P4 qualifying spot. Daniel Ricciardo in 5th place there, Albon 6th, Leclerc 7th, Danny Kvyat keeping a top 10 streak there as well, and kind of keeping close to his teammate there in Gasly in P8, and then the McLaren duo of Norris and Sainz completing the top 10. So that is qualifying, and it shaped up to be an entertaining race on Sunday morning and even earlier morning for myself. But we'll move on to the race. Bottas gets off the line very, very well, and Hamilton actually falls back behind Verstappen into P3 there. And then on the opening lap as well, Magnussen spins, and Stroll gets damage to his front wing and is forced to pit. So it just continues the bad luck for the Canadian driver there in Stroll. And then Magnussen just has had the season that he's had with what he has with Haas. So unfortunate there. But then on lap 2 as well, Bottas hits debris that was left by Sebastian Vettel after he made contact with Magnussen there on that opening lap exchange, and that would end up getting Bottas's car a little bit damaged on the floor, I think it was, and that kind of hurt the performance of that car for the remainder of the race. Pierre Gasly was forced to retire on lap 9 as well after a terminal issue. Unfortunate there after qualifying P4, like we just said, and definitely not deserving for the Frenchman after the work that he put in on the practice session and in qualifying, like Kyle said. So definitely not the race that he wanted, and he could have been on for maybe a podium if things worked out his way after the race. So, yeah. So it seemed like he was en route for a great run, but unfortunately it was a terminal issue that prevented Pierre Gasly from finishing this one early on. Esteban Ocon, we move on to lap 30 here. He retires. It just seemed like he had a mechanical failure, I think it was, for himself. The two Frenchmen out in this one early on. Unfortunate there for those two gentlemen. Then we move on to maybe the second luckiest kind of caution of the day here, Kyle, as for that Ocon kind of incident there, they get a virtual safety car, and Hamilton gets very lucky as Bottas and Verstappen had already pitted for their services, and Hamilton went long on his pit strategy. And with the virtual safety car, everybody has to decrease their speed, and that allows essentially a free pit stop in some cases if the gap's large enough. And luckily for Hamilton, it was, as he goes from third to first in that pit cycle. And that guy, whoever has that luck that Lewis Hamilton does, props to you, because he is a lucky, lucky man at some points in time. There's skill definitely involved, but Hamilton getting the better strategy, which you could never predict really in this sense with the virtual safety car there. So Hamilton gets the lead there from his teammate in Bottas, and then the charging Red Bull in Verstappen. And then on Verstappen, after constant pressure on Bottas, he finally makes the Finnish driver make a mistake. He runs wide, and then Verstappen bolts past on the straightaway on the front stretch and takes P2 with 20 laps to go. So a great run there for, it seemed, for that point in time for the Red Bull driver for Max Verstappen, really challenging the Mercedes for one of the few times this season where they haven't looked so dominant. Verstappen really gave them a run for their money. Kevin Magnussen retires from the race as a precaution, which was an interesting one after feeling some headaches when he was upshifting. So hopefully Magnussen's doing okay. We don't know really anything on his condition or anything right now, but definitely an interesting one. You don't see that too often, but as a precaution, they played it safe, and they're not really racing for anything. They were outside the points anyway, so there's no point in Magnussen trying to continue there. And then, unfortunately, Max Verstappen's run would end up coming to a screeching halt as he would have his right rear tire basically explode, and he would be out of the race after an excellent performance. Safety car would be deployed for himself. Verstappen out of the race, and definitely a tough pill to swallow for him after doing everything right and getting the mechanics back on track for the qualifying session, and then him stepping up to the plate on Sunday there in the race. But unfortunate there for Max Verstappen. And then probably the big kind of rookie mistake of the day, if you want to call it that, or George Russell wrecks into the outside wall under the safety car. He picked the power up, I guess. It was just a very weird one, and just spun it out, and he couldn't believe he did it. I couldn't believe he did it. You couldn't believe he did it. Everybody couldn't believe he did it. Something you never see from George Russell with that kind of a mistake, and it was very, very unfortunate for him there, Kyle.
Oh, brutal. And it's just one that you can't make any excuses for either. It's a mistake that you can't have happen. And it just kind of seems like everything's stacked against George Russell. And I can't wait to fast forward a few years when he's in a top level equipment and he's up competing for podiums and wins and whatever. But for right now, the nice thing is that he's able to step back and kind of make fun of himself as well at times. And obviously this is a situation where you can't make that mistake. And yeah, he had the post, and especially Romain Grosjean, it was great to see him reach out to him. But he also knows to, quote, take the piss out of himself essentially as well, and make fun of the fact that he doesn't have any points in Formula One. But man, it really felt like that was going to be the time.
Yeah, he was en route for it.
And just completely tossed it away.
Yeah, and just an unforced error. No need to do it.
100%.
They were
we talked about Hinchcliffe a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it's very similar in that respect. That's a good comparison there. I can't believe he did it. It's just a learning opportunity for the British driver, and hopefully he can take this and use it as fuel for the remainder of the season, and he can learn from it. But just a disappointing way to end the possibility of his first career F1 point for George Russell. And then with 5 laps to go, Alex Albon's struggles at Red Bull continues as he gets spun by Carlos Sainz, drops the Red Bull driver back to 15th. He wasn't doing too great up to that point anyways, still in the points, but this just adds fuel to the fire of him not returning to Formula One next, or even in the Red Bull seat. I wouldn't say Formula One, but to the Red Bull seat next season. There's not many openings for him. We'll see what they do on that, but this kind of race doesn't help. I think that
it's probably down to 2 things. One, if Tsunoda actually finishes high enough in F2 to make it to F1, I think that's pretty important first off. But if that if that happens, I think Tsunoda is basically a lock for that second seat at this point, which is unfortunate because Kvyat has been very solid, and we'll get to that in a second where he finishes here. But I think that Alba might end up being the reserve driver next year.
I totally agree. I think they're looking at somebody else for that Red Bull seat, and I think Nico Hülkenberg really stands out there as an option for that team. I think that's what they would love to have. I think it would make a great fit over there with Verstappen, but it's just not been the season Alexander Albon's wanted. Got that first career podium in Tuscany there, and that's basically the highlight of his season. I mean, a podium's great, but when you look at the Red Bull, it needs more than that. And when you look at Verstappen challenging for a P2 against a Mercedes car and Albon's fighting back near the back half of the top 10, it's not a great sign. But at the same time, that car is totally built for Verstappen's driving style, and it's going to be a struggle forever goes into that seat. But if they get someone like Hülkenberg, or maybe has a bit more of experience and has more of a say, then it becomes more of an equal kind of pairing there. But for right now, we're in Verstappen's world, and that's Verstappen's team. And whoever comes into that kind of second seat there is going to be playing second fiddle. So I love Albon. I think everybody loves Albon. The trio that Norris, Russell, and Albon really create is a great trio there. But for right now, Albon's the one that's in the best seat of the three and is struggling the most probably of the three in their competitive equipment compared to what they have. So it's unfortunate there for Albon after just another kind of incident there to end a race that he didn't deserve. So at the end of the day, Lewis Hamilton does not stop winning as he wins his 93rd Formula One race ahead of Bottas, and Daniel Ricciardo ends up getting third after the restarts and everything that happened there with Verstappen. So he takes advantage of it, gets P3, and then finally gets to do a shoey on the podium for Renault. Had it at in Germany, and he totally forgot. But then this time,
to see Lewis get in on it as well.
He was there, so great to see. That's a great podium with Verstappen, Ricciardo joining the likes of the Mercedes. It's great to see Ricciardo really take his next step in this season, and it's just unfortunate that he's leaving that team next season, kind of thing. It's just as soon as they start to pick up momentum, it seems like for a driver at a team, they're leaving the next season. So
hey, I don't hate the move to McLaren still.
No, I don't either. It's just I think Renault is starting to pick up the pace, and Ricciardo is, I think, kind of found his groove over there. But it's kind of the Imola GP. Kvyat, though, is probably one of the biggest storylines. P4, probably where we predicted Gasly to probably finish at the end of the day. But Danny Kvyat goes from, I think it was, what did I say here, 8th place to 4th place. And that's an incredible P4. His best finish of the season, if I'm not mistaken.
Please say that guy is still in Formula One next year.
It's unfortunate. He's just had thing after thing after thing. It will,
but man,
it's a tough pill to swallow for Danny Kvyat. You know, he deserves a lot better than what he's had. He had that a couple of races, where he let a little bit go, and that's really ended up what costed him his best, basically.
Cost out a couple torpedoes.
Yeah, just had a couple of torpedo moments, but besides that, he's kept it pretty clean since then in his return to the Toro Rosso AlphaTauri team that it is now. So unfortunate there that we may not see Danny Kvyat back in Formula One next season, with all signs pointing that way. But if he is, it's a great thing. But if he's not, it's been quite the pleasure to have him here in his career thus far. Charles Leclerc continuing his hot streak of performance here, bringing a top 5 for Ferrari there. Just totally maximizing that car to the beyond the potential that it can have. Incredible stuff there from Leclerc. Perez, Sainz, Norris, Raikkonen, who got driver of the day in 9th place, and then Giovinazzi, after getting confirmed for next season, gets a points finish. I believe he's gotten the points before the season, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that. I think he has. But he gets the double points finish there for Alfa Romeo, which is a great sight to see. And then, unfortunately for Williams, they miss out on that point once again. Oh, my God. Nicholas Latifi again. The Canadian. It just seems to be a common theme, man. They just finished 11th. Just can't quite bring it home. And, unfortunate there for Williams to not get a point when they probably deserve one at the end of the day after the drives for both drivers. Up until Russell's mistake, and then Latifi just falling short there by a second or two off of Giovinazzi. So Also, to end the Formula One weekend there before they have an off weekend here, Mercedes sets a new F1 record for their 7th straight Constructors' Championship. Incredible accomplishment. They've just dominated this turbo hybrid era. Nobody's ever going to come close to what they've accomplished here. And in all likelihood, they're going to continue that streak next season with 8, maybe even 9 when the next Formula One car comes out, because who can stop this Mercedes train right now? I can't name a team really. It's just so tough to beat those guys, and they're so consistent. Hamilton getting the win once again, just setting records week after week, and Bottas just not getting the wins that he needs to put up a championship fight. Lewis can clinch the championship next time out in Turkey it is, I believe. So yes. That's their final new track really of the season, if you want to count the Bahrain Oval, if you want to say that's a new track, I guess, but to a new location for this season that wasn't initially planned. We're going to Turkey for the final race that is different for this season. So give me a sum up of the your thoughts of the Formula One weekend that was, Kyle.
Yeah, for starters, heartbroken for Pierre Gasly. He was so strong all weekend long, and to have the opportunity for another podium taken away from him so early on was heartbreaking there. But great to see Kvyat have such a strong race when it seems like he's likely out of that AlphaTauri seat. Remains to be seen. Who knows what can happen there. But if he's not back in an F1 seat next year, that'll be a damn shame because he's a very strong driver. Great to see Renault get back on the podium as well with Daniel Ricciardo and Lewis Hamilton. Was this 5 straight Grand Prix victories now? Like the guy,
I've lost track. I feel like
the guy is
week,
so
I don't keep track.
ridiculously good. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5 straight. Like, come on, and probably should be more like 8. Because if he doesn't have the mishap of pitting too early, who knows? But the guy's ridiculous. And let's see how many he can actually get by the end of the season in a row. Because like at this point, man, it just kind of feels like he might just run the table at some point and just win all the races in a season.
Yeah, I don't know who can really stop him. Bottas just not have enough to beat the soon-to-be 7-time world champion in a matter of weeks here. It's crazy to think that this is the end of the motorsports kind of season here, Kyle. NASCAR is approaching their final week of the season after what has been an incredible season, back and forth with trying to get it back from the pandemic, being basically the first major sport back in North America, or even across the world, being back from a pandemic. And we're approaching the final stages of it with crowning champions in all 3 series. Excuse me. And then Formula One rounding out their season in a matter of weeks here too. So any final thoughts to round up today's episode? That's all the stuff I've got. So unless something broke on Twitter late at night, I don't believe that there was, but if there was, let's hear it. But any final thoughts here to end the episode?
No, nothing crazy. Just the Coca-Cola iRacing Series. One of the championship guys got dumped with 4 laps to go, which means that he no longer has a shot at $100,000, which is pretty insane. So maybe we'll talk about that later this week. We'll see what happens.
Is
there.
that tonight?
Yeah. Which is strange. Yeah, I know. It usually,
they didn't have a week off.
No, which is unfortunate. But they don't usually go on the Tuesday nights, do they? Or it's usually a little bit different, but I feel like it's usually on Wednesdays.
I feel like I think they're on NBC tonight, so I feel like they're on.
Anyways, so that just happened, which is what I was laughing at. But we'll see how that plays out, and hey, we'll give whoever wins the championship a shout out on Thursday's episode as well. But yeah, that's kind of crazy. But yeah, great weekend of racing overall. For starters, I cannot believe that we're going into the final week of the NASCAR season, and 2, I cannot wait because it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more there. It's been a fun one to break down today. Lots of different things to discuss, lots of different opinions, and I love that about today's episode.
Probably the busiest episode that we've had.
Yeah, I'd say so, just because of the amount of controversy that could have been, and the amount of different things that transpired over this past weekend that was. But we've got another weekend, and I'm sure that doesn't stop there. So Make sure to go follow us at The Green Flag on Instagram, and make sure to subscribe on YouTube. We have a new YouTube channel out, and we have all of the previous shows and everything up to date there. Kyle did a great job putting that all together for us. So make sure to go subscribe, hit the like button, comment. I feel like such a YouTuber now, but it does mean a lot if you would subscribe to The Green Flag. So we've got plenty of motorsport stuff to cover over the next week and into the off season as well. It doesn't stop there for us. So we're having fun doing this. It's been a great season to break everything down. I can't believe we're near the end of it, but we'll be back for next season as well throughout the off season too. So make sure to stay tuned for that. We'll talk to you again on Thursday, but thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I've been Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman signing off for now. We will talk to you with our championship preview on Thursday.